Okay, Michael, so after Martin Scorsese absolutely wrecked Marvel and all of its fanboys, Jennifer Anderson has jumped on the bandwagon by saying that the Marvel era is diminishing the film industry.
Well, I mean, acclaimed film director Jennifer Aniston would know what she's talking about.
Oh, right. So she's wrong then.
Well, I don't know. Okay, so the way I look at it, she's an actress. I don't think she's done anything significant in terms of producing films, and also she's not that critically acclaimed as an actress. So basically what I'm saying is I agree with her, but at the same time I feel like my agreement with her is just as valid and important as her statement itself. With Martin Scorsese, I'm like, okay, yeah, this critically acclaimed film director who's been in the industry for ages has said that Marvel isn't cinema. But Jennifer Aniston says it. It's kind of just like, somebody... It's like if you said it. That's kind of my reaction if you said it. Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, I just don't think she's, that interesting.
Oh, God.
I mean, Friends was like 1 billion years ago.
Well, she says she wants the era of Meg Ryan to come back. So that's the thing, though. The era of Meg Ryan was in the 90s. The Marvel movies didn't start getting popular until the mid-2010s, I guess. Basically, she's harking back to an era of nostalgia.
Was she saying she was born in the wrong generation?
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, she was born in the right generation.
She wasn't. She should have been born earlier, so she'd never even had to experience a Marvel film.
Okay. Yeah, well, she just said that the era that she was first acting in is gone. But here's the thing about Marvel. Obviously, Scorsese bashed it, and Aniston is like, these movies are popular. People go to see them. And I believe, Michael, movies are designed to make money. So, I just think it's what you're critiquing really isn't Marvel. What you are critiquing is capitalism. So the next step is to have a communist revolution and create art which actually has some meaning. That's what Jennifer Aniston, I think, is, and Martin Scorsese will ultimately be proposing.
Yeah, you're right, yeah. So basically we've got to destroy capitalism to Marvel, more like Marxville.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to Select and Reflect, the movie review podcast where we look at films from the near and distant past. We give them a couple of watches and evaluate them beyond first impressions. I'm your host Michael, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Luke. And this week we are continuing our dive into Spooktober, looking at zombie films for the month, the duration of the month. And we are now looking at they're classics. They're not like classics in that they're not like old classics, but they are most definitely classics, and those are Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, the final two installments in the original Romero of the Dead trilogy. So Luke, why don't you tell us a thing or two about Dawn of the Dead?
Well, yeah, sure thing, Michael. I just want to say I think Dawn of the Dead definitely is a classic. I mean, it's 41 years old now. I mean, that's quite a long time. And obviously, 4 decades. Yeah, it's one of the most revered horror movies of all time. So yeah, it's definitely in that classic category.
So...
and obviously last week we did Night of the Living Dead, which is also in that category for being the first zombie film. And later we will be doing Day of the Dead. But first, Dawn of the Dead. So, Dawn of the Dead, also internationally known as Zombie, or Zombie. Okay, known as Zombies just with an I on the end, or Zombie just with an IE on the end.
See, actually that's relevant because one of the films I was thinking about doing... because next week, spoiler alert, we're doing Return of the Living Dead, and Return of the Living Dead is a spiritual successor to Night of the Living Dead, but there's also a film called Zombie 2, and again, it's Zombie with an I, no E, and that was written as a spiritual successor to Dawn of the Dead, despite neither film having been made by Romero. So, basically, some people, I guess before intellectual property was a thing, back in the anarchic days of cinema, were like, oh, we'll just steal this zombie idea and make our own version. I don't think they're very good.
Okay. Anyway, so Dawn of the Dead is a 1978 Italian-American independent zombie horror film directed by George Romero. It was written by Romero in collaboration with Italian filmmaker Dario Argento and produced by Richard Rubinstein. And as mentioned, it is the second film in Romero's Night of the Living Dead series. It stars David M.G., Ken Foree, Scott Reiniger, and Galen Ross. It was released on April the 20th, 1979, in the United States and September the 1st, 1978 in Italy. So I guess, yeah, it's 40 years for the United States, so it's kind of an anniversary. Michael, can you guess what the budget was for Dawn of the Dead?
No, I cannot. See, again, it's another case of inflation. Plus, I'm going to go for like 200,000.
Wow, 1.5 million.
Yeah, it's way too low.
Yeah,
I was thinking that.
That's a shit guess.
Well, I wasn't really thinking about how kind of many things there were apart from them being in the supermarket. Supermarket, the mall. So I was kind of thinking, they just go to a mall and like film there. But then, to be honest, they do a fair few things other than that. So,
can you guess the box office now? How much did it make?
Quite a lot. I don't know. I'm going to go for like what seems quite generous and say 75 million.
Well, it is a cult classic. That's the phrase used to describe this film. So naturally, you would assume it would be quite a bit higher than its budget, and it is, but not that high. Only 55 million. Okay,
I'm quite happy that I wasn't too far off.
Yeah, which still made it's over 10, and not over. Yeah, over 10 times its budget. Basically,
it's like
50 times its budget. Yeah. I got confused where the 1 and the 5 were and the 1.5 million there. Anyway, so that's all the stuff you need to know about Dawn of the Dead. And Michael, did you like this movie?
Yeah, I did. I thought this film was good.
Good? Just good?
Well, okay, so I think this film is considered to be like really good. My thoughts on it have always been, since the first time I watched it, that it's a bit long.
Well, I watched the extended version. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think so how long is it? 2020?
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe that's it. Yeah, because I think I've only ever seen the extended version. But I always kind of think to myself like it's not as quite as much bang for my time as I expect from a zombie film. Generally, a zombie film I expect like quite short, but just
okay, bang. We'll get into that. Yeah.
So I was sat there and I sort of at some points I found myself thinking it's a bit like dragging on a bit, and that is obviously not a great feeling to have. Although I did still enjoy it. I enjoyed it, but I had some negative feelings towards it, and that's why I say I liked it. But
okay, well, I'll say yes. I also liked it as well. I was just expecting maybe a bit more from you because obviously you recommended this film. You recommended all these films, and obviously this one is probably the most famous of all of them. Maybe even more than Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. See, I would generally expect this film to be the best of the three, logically. And the reason why I would say that is because you've got Night of the Living Dead, which is considered a classic, but it's also very old. And, old films, they're just not good. And then you've got, obviously, Day of the Dead, which is not considered a classic. And of course, in the middle, you've got Dawn of the Dead, which you think would be a perfect combination of a classic, but recent enough, kind of late enough into this development of the horror genre that it would be kind of fantastic. And I think for me, it's sort of a letdown compared to the hype. And that is something I actually struggle with. Like, I think, to be honest, I still like it quite a lot, but it's just the hype is quite high. I've never been completely down with the hype.
Oh, yeah, okay, I guess so. So we'll get into that. But Michael, how many nitpicks do you have?
So, this doesn't necessarily affect the quality of the film. I actually have to... Tell me how many you've got, because I accidentally have not found my face. Okay, no, I'm here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Fuck me.
And a lit pick, but it's not really a lit pick. But it is...
I see, I haven't got any nitpicks, and I think some of the nitpicks that you will have are just going to be just the worst kind of nitpicks, which you're criticising the characters for doing things which are little things which just piss you off and you off alone. I fear that's going to be the case, so please, just go ahead and get it over with.
Nitpick number 1. I don't like how Fran had her hair. No, I'm kidding. So that scene where Fran just doesn't know how to handle there being 2 zombies, where, of course, Flyboy is being attacked on the ground and he's trying to reach the hammer, and there's also a zombie behind Anne who's like a good couple of paces away and she's just staring back and forth. Like, it almost felt like a comedy routine. Number 2, that the zombie gets slightly closer. He's got a shotgun. He fires. The zombie's really far away. Number 3, apparently it's not very difficult to drive a screwdriver. This is a real nitpick. It's not very difficult to drive a screwdriver into a zombie's head. This is of course where the blonde policeman, I actually don't remember his name, Roger? Yeah, Roger. Kind of just somewhat effortlessly digs a screwdriver into a zombie's skull. It's a skull. I don't think you can do that easily. I refuse to believe there are no lockable doors between their little hide hole and the rest of the mall. It just seems, clearly it's like a security place. They have keys. I'm just surprised that apparently there's no locks for the place that goes into the kind of back room. Okay, they didn't leave the woman with a weapon that time when he left. That was stupid. And she had to use flares. And when did this happen? I can't remember actually when this happened, but I guess it must have because I've got it written down. They put zombies in the fridge with the food.
Yeah, they do.
Apparently.
So they don't put it in a fridge. They put it in an area which is cold where they store a bunch of food.
Okay, yeah. For some reason, I got that my first time. I kind of must have blanked it my second time.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, it just seems like obviously they're having food is a good thing. And I would think the best bet would be to not, get any of the food tainted. And finally, rather than practicing on dummies, of course, there's a moment where they're kind of shooting dummies in the ice rink. They've already mentioned how there's like loads of zombies outside. I would think they would just, say, hey, let's go practice up on the roof shooting zombies, seeing as they're wasting the ammunition already. They're doing, they're shooting dummies. Why don't you just go upstairs and shoot the zombies? And it's more, moving targets. Win, win, win.
Okay, fair enough.
And my lit pick.
Oh, here we go.
Did you notice how when they're about to leave on the helicopter and the people show up who are planning on going by boat somewhere and you think they're going to be this big threat and then they sort of actually turn out to be pretty chill? One of the guys is played by the same person who plays Rhodes, Captain Rhodes, in Day of the Dead.
Is that true?
Yeah, it is true. Because I was looking at him. I only noticed it this last time that I watched it. And I was looking at it and I was like, hey, that guy kind of reminds me of Rhodes. And then I looked it up, and I actually forgotten the name of the guy who plays Rhodes, but
okay,
so those are my nitpicks. So I'll let you now explain the plot, Luke. Do it.
Well, sure thing, Michael. I guess the plot is pretty simple.
By the way, I'm kind of surprised you don't have any. I mean, I could see, I guess the thing is, because my thing is, talking about people doing things I hate, and I guess that's mostly the main nitpick you can get out of a horror film, so I'm not surprised.
Well, here's the thing. There are issues with this movie, and
I got issues.
I could nitpick a bunch of stuff, but then I'd be here all day, and...
Oh! Joseph... The guy who played Rhodes is called Joseph Pilato. He died this year. How sad.
Why is that an oh moment? I thought you were going to tell me something really interesting. That is...
Oh, he's dead.
Yeah. What, does that mean he's going to come back to life now and kill us all?
I don't know, but apparently he voiced Harry Cooper in the Night of the Living Dead video game, which was released in 2015.
Fair enough. Anyway, so the plot of this movie, pretty simple. All the characters, there's 4 characters who we follow. Those are Flyboy, Peter, Roger, and what's the girl called again?
Fran.
Fran, that's it. They all survive in a shopping mall, and they barricade themselves inside this suburban shopping mall amid the mass hysteria of the zombie outbreak. And the movie is just... Well, we'll get into what the movie is all about, but basically, I guess to start off talking about this movie, the beginning, it is unusual, because what happens is the movie starts in the middle of a broadcast.
Yeah.
It's 2 people debating whether people should kill the zombies. One of them is like a scientist who's like, yes, definitely, we should kill these zombies. We should do it. We can't think about emotions.
We should eat their brains.
We can't think about logic. They may be your family members, but they've got to go. They've got to die because they're a threat. And the other person's like, no, you can't do this. These are people's family members. You can't expect people to do that or whatever. So immediately it's like, okay, we're in a zombie apocalypse right away. There's no slow build up like there is in Night of the Living Dead. And also, we have, what was I going to say? Oh, a George Romero cameo as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I actually don't really know that much about what Romero looks like. I imagine he just looks like every generic guy from the 70s. Yeah,
no, he did. He was on the control panel right at the beginning. I think Fran maybe sits next to him, I'm not sure. But yeah, he's on the control panel where obviously it makes sense for him to be since he's the director. So the cameo works. But anyway, so that's how it starts. And we're about 3 weeks into the zombie apocalypse. And the next scene is Roger DeMarco, who's a trooper, going into a housing project trying to kill the dead because the residents aren't letting the dead die, because obviously the residents, the dead are the families. So immediately, right away, we're thrust into this world, into this universe, which is obviously completely different to the vast majority of zombie movies. Even like the one we watched a couple of weeks ago, Zombieland, it's kind of like that. You're thrust into it, but even so, there's a flashback of Jesse Eisenberg discovering the zombie outbreak for the first time. So there is none of that. It's just like we're straight in, and the movie just assumes you know what will have happened. And considering there is a sequel, well, not a sequel, a movie that came before this, Night of the Living Dead, which pretty much would explain how this kind of thing would occur. So yeah, what do you think about that at the start? It's quite unusual.
Well, I had one thing, which is obviously you mentioned Night of the Living Dead, and obviously the names of the 3 trilogy films, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead, would kind of imply almost a sequential trilogy. And in a weird way, obviously, this film, it almost feels like it could be a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. For one thing, it also takes place in Philadelphia. No, not Philadelphia. Sorry, what's Pennsylvania? It probably does take place in Philadelphia. Actually, obviously,
no, it does. It is in Philly. Yeah.
Yeah. So both films take place in Pennsylvania, and you could say, for example, hey, there was Night of the Living Dead, and then maybe they missed some of the zombies, and now it's come back. And I think that's and obviously Day of the Dead is very easy to see how that could be a follow-on from Dawn of the Dead. So it is kind of interesting that it almost feels like a very spiritual sequel, in that you kind of get the impression it's not really a sequel. I mean, obviously it's not a sequel for a few reasons. Number one, time-wise, Night of the Living Dead was very clearly set in the 60s. This film is very clearly set in the 70s. Like they play an arcade game, for example. So it's almost like a kind of floating timeline / slightly different. But I do think it's kind of interesting when you kind of watch it and have in the back of your head like, oh yeah, okay. So it's very clear, I think, that Night of the Living Dead is intended as kind of background reading, as it were, for this film. And like you say, that's because obviously it's assuming, hey, you know what zombies are. You know this. Come on. And
so you think it's a good thing there? You don't think you needed that context? Because I agree.
Yeah, and also I think the fact that it was started off in a newsroom is a quite clever place to start.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Because obviously it means that you kind of get a lot of information very quickly, and it obviously feels completely organic because in a newsroom they would be talking about all of this stuff. So it was actually a very clever decision, I think, to have it be set in a newsroom. And also, I think in a way it kind of feels very real, in that I think like a lot of other zombie films have this assumption that when a zombie apocalypse happens, everything's just going to immediately fall apart. Whereas I think in this film, there's kind of the implication of like, at first they try to deal with it. And, you've got these guys who are they're still working in their newsroom, still basically acting as if things are going to continue how they, have continued in the past. They're still arguing about these things. Obviously, there's a guy worried about ratings and things like that.
Yes.
And that kind of feels much more realistic. Actually, if this thing happened, and obviously this is again assuming people didn't have any background concept of the zombie, then people would sort of for a while just be like, on the news talking about this disease. What are we going to do about this disease? So I thought that was quite realistic, and I like that. Yeah.
No, that's good. Obviously, then we have the 4 characters escape away in a helicopter, and they confront Rhodes, which I didn't notice as they're doing so. And then
he's running this monkey farm now.
Yes, and eventually they end up in a shopping mall. I believe it's a real one set in Pittsburgh, I believe.
Okay, yeah, because they said they went past Harrisburg, so
yeah. So yeah, there you go. So that's where the shopping mall is, and obviously that's where the whole rest of the movie takes place. Just them in a shopping mall. So George Romero is like, yes, when he was conceiving this movie, we're gonna have the zombies break out. We're gonna have people surviving. Apart from actually, they land and try to get some fuel, and they get attacked a bit in like a farmhouse area. But apart from that, the whole rest of the movie set in this shopping mall. And yeah, George Romero very, very keen on this idea of the shopping mall, and he might have thought, hey, this is a good place to hang out if ever there was a zombie apocalypse. Or he might have thought first, I want to do a movie about consumerism, which we'll get onto when talking about the themes, and then. He's like, okay, well, we'll just have the characters stay in the shopping mall because of course, the shopping mall is the core of consumerism.
Yeah.
What way around do you think it was? Do you think the theme came after, or he was like, yeah, I want to make a zombie movie about how zombies are like humans, Go on, you too.
I think it's possible that the second one, so basically he had that thought. And the reason why I would think that is because Romero, obviously, one question people might ask is because, of course, Romero is famous for the Of the Dead trilogy, is what was he doing between 68 and... When was this film? It was in the 70s. I guess you've got details when was it?
Yeah, it's 78. It was released in Italy, 79 in the United States. So
that's like a 10, 11 year gap.
Yeah.
And what Romero has done are other things, which is he did something called The Crazies, and he did The Hills Have Eyes. And the point being, he didn't need to return back to the series. And my assumption would be, therefore, that, he could have done, if he wanted to just do a generic zombie film, he could have just made, any of his other, The Hills Have Eyes, The Crazies, which are basically the same concept. But he chose to kind of return back to this universe, and I think the reason why that makes me think he probably came up with the theme first is because, of course, Night of the Living Dead has a lot of themes in it, and I think maybe he thought, well, this is gonna carry on a lot of themes, and therefore I'm going to add it to my my Of the Dead universe. I'm going to create an Of the Dead cinematic universe, as it were, and this is going to be the second installment. It's going to explore another theme. So I kind of think the fact that he made it an Of the Dead thing suggests that he actually came up with the idea of exploring something about society, and the thing is, obviously, the criticism of the later Of the Dead trilogy, the one he made in the early 2000s, is that people feel that his social commentary was a bit ham-fisted, which implies that in other words, Romero was thinking with that series, hey, you know what, I'm going to do some more social commentary, I'm going to make another Of the Dead trilogy, and obviously then the themes were considered to be a bit ham-fisted by some people. The implication being...
By everyone, I think.
Yeah, the implication being that is how Romero... his mind has worked when it comes to the Of the Dead trilogy. He thought, what about this thing? How can I explore that thing? I'll make an Of the Dead film.
How can I explore that thing via zombies, basically?
Yeah, via zombies, yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of my thoughts.
It does work because zombies are kind of a blank canvas. You can do a lot of things with them, like, we saw with Night of the Living Dead and with this, and obviously with the next movie, Day of the Dead, that, you can put them in different eras and different... decades, I guess, with 60s, 70s, and 80s, and have them represent different things. So before we jump into consumerism and the theme of that, anything more on the actual plot? Because it is kind of difficult, because they just literally stay in a shopping mall, they do a bunch of stuff. Obviously, what's he called? Roger dies after getting bit. But there's not really anything else to latch onto and talk about, really.
Well, I had a few things to say. I think most of what I say kind of does relate to the nature of them being zombies, but I think it's kind of also relevant to the plot. So I think the thing that's interesting is that in some sense you could say, I mean, you said the idea that Romero possibly thought about what would I do, where would I hold up in the event of a zombie apocalypse, and he thought, hey, Moore, and obviously this is kind of a perfect place to hold up in a zombie apocalypse, especially seeing as someone points out, they have a nuclear power reactor. So they have constant electricity for, I assume nuclear generators, last a very long time. And that's obviously like such a great place to live. So I think that was kind of an interesting idea of, because obviously with Night of the Living Dead, it was a farmhouse. It wasn't necessarily the best place in the world to hold up. Whereas this question, I think, is interesting in that it gets more to the human flaws, because the location is great. They've got loads of food. They've got all this stuff, and I think a lot of what came out of them being in a mall. I like this. I like the scene where they're kind of just moving around the zombies, weaving in between them, because it's sort of showing how these zombies aren't a huge threat, and how in some sense it's like, hey, it's not too bad. And I thought it was I liked how this film leaned into that. Whereas obviously Night of the Living Dead, it was like, oh my god, there's 5 zombies outside. They'll be here in 30 minutes.
The benefits on the zombie apocalypse, like that scene in Zombieland as well.
Yeah, and also obviously the scene where I think, for me, possibly one of the highlights, weirdly, was the scene where they're in the mall doing loads of mall stuff. Like when they have the little dinner date where they're ice skating around, and you kind of get like, oh yeah, that's kind of what people would do in that situation. And it sort of, again, shows how it's not all doom and gloom, and it's a good situation to be in. But then the flip side to that is obviously, like I say, it's a really great location, but that's when the human aspect comes into it, because obviously there are a lot of, I think, mistakes, which obviously I've been through plenty of those. And even then, you could talk about so many instances where you think, well, you know, they could have been a lot smarter.
Yeah, I know.
But I think in a way that kind of is not the worst thing in the world, because like I say, the whole point is, hey, it's a great location, but, you know, there's human beings all have flaws, and eventually, without kind of a society to prop things up, if it's just a bunch of people, they're going to make mistakes. And then, of course, the other human aspect, well, there's, I guess, 3 human aspects. The second human aspect is the fact that they seem to go kind of a bit crazy. I mean, so the 2 obvious examples are the rather melodramatic, what have we done to ourselves? Which, to be honest, is funny. Do you remember the bit where Fran turns off the TV? And then Flyboy, I think his name's George, but that might not be true. So I'm just going to call him Flyboy because I'm certain his name's Flyboy.
I think it's Stephen, actually.
Oh yeah, Stephen. Yeah, I think that's it. So then Stephen just gets up and passive aggressively turns it on again. And she's like, what have we done to ourselves? So that's one example of like the people kind of falling apart. The other one being, of course, the bit where Roger, he's going a bit off the rails. He's kind of going a bit doolally, which I will say I wish that kind of had more of a setup. It kind of does just seem to come from nowhere. And it's a bit OTT.
Well, it's because he had a near-death experience. So that's the reasoning. Maybe it's not that realistic. I don't know, but that is the reasoning behind it. Yeah.
But I did kind of like what they were going for, which is obviously the idea of somebody kind of going crazy, and then obviously he dies because of that. And you know, I liked obviously everything that came from that with him. And they die. But then the third aspect of human beings is when the raiders show up, and I was totally on board for that. I will say, okay, it's kind of interesting. You see like the different ways that people deal with them, because obviously they fly over when they're flying over kind of, I heard it said like Pennsylvania is basically 2 cities with Alabama in the middle. Which does seem to be true. Yeah. Which does seem to be true, because obviously they fly over and you get these like rednecks with guns and stuff, and obviously they're dealing with it their way. Seems like quite a good way of dealing with it, to be honest. But then you get these raiders who show up, and honestly, those raiders, it doesn't seem that bad, Luke. I think, you know, it certainly beats going crazy in a shopping mall. At least they're out there just having fun, riding around. But anyway, they show up, and that's it. I mean, that's kind of the thing that causes it all to go wrong. It's not the zombies, it's the human beings coming in and starting a fight. So that was interesting. And obviously then back to the kind of other kind of human aspect, you get Stephen is basically unnecessarily really starts a fight.
Oh, well, that's with consumerism, though.
Yeah. So I was going to say, okay, so that's fine. And obviously, but that does also speak to kind of, like I say, we're talking about sort of the fact that it's a great location, but human flaws. And obviously that then leads to all sorts of problems for him.
Yeah, Michael, I would imagine him dying would count as a problem for him, for sure. But yeah.
That was really snarky, Luke.
Yeah, okay. So I think ultimately with this movie, it is quite slow, and, you know, there's some nice set pieces, there's some stuff that happens, but yeah, generally, it is... The thing is, the characters involved, they aren't stereotypes. They don't fit a particular style of character, like, for instance, in Day of the Dead, or even Night of the Living Dead to a certain extent. You know, and if you think about... I've referenced Zombieland 3 times, but I think it's a good example here, because if you think about Zombieland, the characters are very easily defined. They're all, you know, stereotypes. Yeah. This one is... The characters really do feel incredibly real. They just feel incredibly just human. That's because they don't have any defining features. And normally that would be like, oh, they're shit because they're bland. But when you're holed up in this sort of world they're in, and you've got the zombies and they're trying to do stuff, it is just... It seems incredibly realistic, and that's what I take from this movie more than anything. In terms of the plot, in terms of praise for the plot, it's just this feels like...
In terms of zombies running around everywhere.
Yeah. If a zombie apocalypse ever did occur, this feels like the most accurate depiction of what would happen. And I think that's got to count for something.
For the record, I don't have too much else to say. I just wanted to bring up one thing, which is I liked, kind of one thing. I liked Peter's decision to, like, sacrifice himself. Although, to be fair, it's not really sacrificing himself. He's sort of just like, I don't want to go. But then he's like, nah, I'm going to go in the end. I don't know. I liked it.
Well, let's talk about the ending, because you know it changed, right, obviously. It changed from Peter and Fran committing suicide. Fran was going to get her head chopped off by the helicopter blade, and Peter was just going to shoot himself, as he starts to do, then decides not to do in the actual movie. And, well, here's the thing. I don't really see the point of them shooting themselves. I don't think that would be a good choice, because I don't know what it would really represent. Because naturally, people want to survive, obviously. It's human instinct. So if they're going to shoot themselves, they'd have to do it for a reason. And I don't know, especially Peter, because obviously, Fran, you could say, well, she lost her boyfriend, the father of her kids, and maybe she just wants to shoot herself. But for Peter, I don't know why he would do that, really. Surely he'd want to survive. So I'm glad they changed it, because I'm not against it, but I didn't really see the point of them going in that direction. So what do you think?
I mean, I think so. My main thought is, like, obviously, you get Night of the Living Dead, where everyone dies at the end, which was kind of a shocking ending, I think. So maybe he was thinking, oh, I'll do the same thing again.
Yeah, but that worked, though.
So, but I'm kind of thinking so. So I'm kind of thinking that's why he maybe wanted to do it. But I think, it wouldn't work. I mean, apart from anything else, it would just be kind of, the same thing again. And also, I think it just, in this film, I don't think it makes that much sense, because I don't think, in Night of the Living Dead, you kind of get this sense of helplessness from it, like, in a way that a lot of the characters act. Whereas in this film, it's almost like, it kind of feels like towards the end, there is a sense of purpose that's developed, for the characters. Like, obviously, you kind of get confused, and then obviously they have that moment where they're chilling in the mall, and, they kind of have some of their dodgy moments. But towards the end, you kind of think, like, okay, no, they know what they're doing. They're all about getting that zombie bread.
Okay,
or more
do you
like zombie
think,
dead.
Okay, this is the question I'm going to pose to you, because I think we're at the end of the plot. Because here's the thing. I was looking at the Wikipedia page, and some people describe this movie as Yawn of the Dead. E.g., it was boring. Because, again, I said, nothing much happens really until the raiders show up at the end. There's a large gap in the movie where they're just doing shit. And again, I said that could be viewed as good because it's realistic. The characters are realistic. And so that's what's intriguing about it. It's like, oh, this is what would actually happen in a real zombie apocalypse. But is it the case that this movie is a bit boring, Michael? What do you think?
So obviously I said it was a bit long, and
yes.
And I think they probably should have engaged in some cutting, in a sense. Like, there should have been, I don't know. I mean, I couldn't say exactly what it is they should have cut, but I do think that actually it could have been tighter for what happens. The funny thing is, when I think back on it, all I remember is the standout moments, like the bits that I liked. Such as, for example, when they're, trying on things in the mall, which I really like, and stuff like that. But, the flip side is, I do remember also when I was watching it feeling bored at some points. And I would say, all in all, if this film does have a weakness, it is that it is kind of boring, if you get what I'm saying. So ultimately, no matter how much you do or don't like this film, I would expect that the, thing that's always going to be the pushback against anyone is going to be the fact that it does feel sort of like, and I would say it's not as simple as nothing happens, but I think it's just the case that what does happens very slowly, in a way, that's kind of my thoughts. Like, I feel like they could have done some, because obviously you could say, like, character exploration and stuff like that is not nothing, and it should be entertaining. And I feel like this film does have that, but for some reason it just feels like everything's happening slowly,
they kind
at a zombie pace.
They really don't have character exploration.
No, I guess,
that's the thing. And it only really happens with Fran, to be honest.
Yeah.
The rest of them don't have, like, arcs and stuff. And again, I think, like I said before, that kind of works because it's, like, realistic. Like, if you were in a zombie apocalypse, you wouldn't really explore your character. You'd just be focused on surviving,
Yeah, I think actually, now I think about it, and this is actually a good pivot because I still have a few more things to say about the zombies specifically. The main reason actually I think why this is possibly quite boring is because there doesn't feel like that much of a genuine threat.
Okay, this is a good segue.
Yeah, because we have the same zombies as before, and I don't just mean obviously when we're talking about kind of the standard Romero zombies, we're talking about slow moving, kill them by shooting them in the head, things like that. And it's not just that, it's that these zombies, they aren't very swarmy. Obviously, there is the scene of them kind of running around, avoiding them, not really having any issue with it. And that's fine. It's something which makes sense to me in a zombie film, and I can understand. But then the problem is, it feels like there's never really much of an issue. And at that point, you kind of think, well, I mean, have they really got much to worry about? Like, there is no sense of an impending danger. I mean, something I wrote down actually for zombies is the fact that apparently some people just in the flat the apartment block, which they saw at the beginning, were able to tie up like a dozen zombies. And you think like, well, if just a group of people in an apartment block were able to do that, surely a group of armed policemen would be able to kill them. And even going back to the rednecks in Philadelphia, I was thinking, well, looking at Pennsylvania, looking at the short work of it, those rednecks are making, you'd think that, it's not going to be long before the rednecks show up at the mall and shoot Peter in the face when he peers out of his gun. But the point is, it does feel like these zombies are not a huge threat.
Yeah, you're right. Again, but you could say, well, Judge Romero, the point of the movie wasn't really about the zombies in themselves, so that's why they're not a threat. But I do agree. I think in a zombie movie, the zombies should be a threat. And the thing is, they're not. Like, I can't believe people died to these zombies, genuinely.
Yeah, I mean, sorry. Yeah,
it was set in 1978, and so you got to give them a bit, of leeway, I guess. But in 68, the zombies was quite similar, but it was like, okay, it's the first ever zombie movie of its kind. Yeah. The first ever movie like this, so it's okay if the zombies are not that scary. But this one in 1978, 10 years later, maybe you can make the zombies a bit more scary than literally just get like a gun and just push them away and they fall over and that's it.
Yeah.
I can't understand how so many people will have died to these zombies when you could just literally like jog past them. And like fucking Roger was caught in between two lorries and he had like 10 zombies like clawing at him. And that should be dead right away, man. But he still somehow manages to survive up until one of the zombies jumps on him and bites him. But well, actually, no. Doesn't one of the zombies bite his leg? Is that it?
I think one of them bites his arm and another one bites his leg.
Ah, right. Okay. Well, anyway, basically, he shouldn't have even escaped from that. He should have been dead. And there's various times where characters are just surrounded by zombies and they just easily just run out of it. And it does lead me to think, why are they so scared of the zombies if they just need to, go back to back, just shoot them. Yeah. And then you'd be okay, especially when you've got two fucking state troopers on.
Well, I think the funny thing is, obviously after that scene with Roger getting killed, obviously the thing they're doing in that is they're parking up a bunch of lorries or trucks outside of all the main entrances to the mall in order to stop zombies getting in, so that they can kill every single zombie in the place. And basically, there's a scene of them sort of killing some zombies, but pretty much they clear the entire mall of zombies off screen in a way.
Very
like basically
easily.
It cuts. Yeah, and you just think, and that's kind of it. You think to yourself, and that's why obviously I was saying, hey, why don't they just pick off zombies, when they were kind of doing the target practice and they were using the dummies. And I was thinking, why not just shoot the zombies?
Yeah, I know it was 40 years ago and all, but the fact is they're just not good enough. And it is a real shame. I think the zombies, we'll talk about Day of the Dead. The zombies in Day of the Dead are much better. They're much more aggressive. And that's what they should have been in 78. Because like I said, give him some leeway for Night of the Living Dead, Romero, first ever zombie movie. But this one, you got to have them more scary and more aggressive and not be able to just be shoved over by a push. And then that's it. How did these zombies take over the entire United States being this slow? It just doesn't make any sense.
Really, this should be... I mean, it would make sense if this was like a film about obesity and basically, or like laziness, and if just all the Americans were just too fat and lazy to do anything. But as things happen, it doesn't really make much sense. I also wanted to say on that note, I think this is kind of... You're talking about the people, dying. This film, it gives us... We kind of get... I mean, we'll get into this Day of the Dead. We do get an escalation of zombie gore. So obviously in Night of the Living Dead, we get that scene of the zombies kind of eating deceased bits of people's flesh. In this film, we do get people being torn apart, people being eaten alive. The problem is obviously in this, the first thing I think is this makes no sense. Like, there's a guy who literally runs to... It's so weird. He runs to the blood pressure thing, sits down, locks himself in, and just waits for the zombies to swarm him. And the thing is, so I guess there's kind of two things here. Okay, well, that's
in the special effects thing we'll talk about later.
No, yeah, sorry, yeah. But the thing I wanted to talk about basically is just say, I mean, it's I like that. I think that's what zombie film should be about, like people being swarmed and ripped apart. It just makes no sense in this film. So I don't know, yeah. I mean, that was kind of my bit where I was like, yeah, okay, I like that I can see the beginnings of kind of zombie fun, but it just doesn't make any sense that these guys who have apparently been surviving on the road, get torn apart by these zombies that can be beaten just by, running into them with an aggressive pace. If you were like on a rush to catch a train, you could probably kill one of these zombies by bumping into it.
Yeah, and that is the issue. And that is the issue with the zombies and it is the issue with the movie.
One of the zombies gets his head chopped off just by like standing up.
He
gets his head chopped off by a a helicopter.
Yeah, that's good though. I like that. And also some of the zombies look like blue, which of course you want them to look slightly paler, slightly disfigured.
There's like a black guy at the beginning. I think it was called Miguel. I mean, I guess he was. I don't know. He looked black. I guess he was like black Hispanic. But it was like he was in whiteface. White chicks.
He looked very blue. Yes, and I was like, oh, that doesn't look good at all. Like
also, I like when Roger. Like it doesn't really make sense because for some reason, after becoming a zombie, he looked like an old man, and you think, hold on a minute, surely the reason why kind of zombies look like that is because they decompose. But if he's literally just died, surely he would just look like a normal dead person. Why does he look like he's some wrinkly old prune of a corpse?
Yeah.
Whatever.
I'll actually say, Michael, I think in talking about scariness, Night of the Living Dead might be scarier.
I agree, yeah, you're right, yeah, Night of the Living Dead is scarier.
Which shouldn't really be the case for a movie that's made a decade later with, better technology, more money. This movie, of course, it's not really about the scariness, but there should be some element of the zombies being scary if it is a horror movie. And unfortunately, that is not the case. That is another bad mark against this movie. And of course, you have to put it into context. It's 40 years ago, but you just look at what Romero did literally 7 years later with Day of the Dead. Yeah. The zombies, I will say, and like I have said, they're much better then. So, I do think we should, knock it a bit.
Yeah, I agree. Did you say we're going to talk about effects later?
No, let's talk about them now, actually. Let's talk about them now. I mean, it's kind of involved.
So I guess obviously the zombie effects are, there's no impressive zombie effects. I mean, basically it's kind of basic.
It's charming.
Basic makeup.
Okay? It's charming. Yes. It's like 1978. They don't have like the little money. They don't have a lot, but they still manage to create some effects which I don't think they're scary. They're not horrific unless a Christian mom from Kansas or whatever who's concerned about your kids being influenced by this film. I'm sure there was some moral outrage about it at the time, and the gore in this movie. But again, it's not scary. But you have to just say, well, that's impressive for the money they spent, and like Tom Savini, he's the one who did it. He's the famous guy behind all of this. Yeah, and I think the creativity deserves some respect.
Yeah. So what you're saying is the blood is too bright red. The
blood is too bright red. Exactly. Yes, it is. It is shocking how bright red the blood is.
It was like before like the 1980s, they'd never seen blood before.
Yeah.
They didn't know what it looked like, so it was like it's probably looks like orange. No, not orange juice. It probably looks like cranberry juice. I don't know what's bright red. Probably cranberry juice.
And what did you think, by the way, by the headshot scene at the beginning? Because I thought that was again like it's not. Like today, it looks like kind of funny and stupid, and it's like, oh, obviously that's not real. But I think it's impressive. Like
wait, let me check something. I'm pretty sure there's a story behind that. Just headshot. It's like something like.
This is why you need to do your research ahead of time, Michael.
You know what? You reminded me of it. I'm quite sure it's something like they had just a head lying around in storage.
Oh yeah. To do that. It was the head of Fran. Yes.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
And so they decided to blow it up, because Fran was going to die at the end, so they got to cast off her head to shoot. But when the ending was changed, they were like, hey, we got a head. Well, let's put it on a guy and shoot it. And again, it's right at the beginning of the movie, which I like.
Get shot by racist Rickles. That's how I'll know him.
It's one of the literally the first zombie deaths in the movie. And it gets his head blown off. It doesn't.
I appreciated that.
Yeah, again, it doesn't look that great, but the charm of it, the creativity, the ingenuity to do something like that, the effort as well. You gotta appreciate it. You gotta respect it. So those are my thoughts, I guess, on the special effects. I like the zombie getting his head cut off by the helicopter blade. That's nice. I like that. And all the gags involved with them putting fucking pies in the face of zombies as well.
I like that.
It's like, hey, don't
that also felt quite real, and I think I like that.
Yeah, don't take it too seriously. I guess it's not really meant to shock and scare you. It's not. It's just meant to be fun, I guess, and that's what I took from it, and I think that was the intention. So even though the effects, I guess you could argue they haven't held up in some ways. They have, because it's not really about the scariness. And if you look at it like that, then you can enjoy all the awful scenes in which somebody stabs someone and they immediately cut away from the shot, and there's blood just spurting out, bright red blood, of course, just spurting out of somebody's head.
Yeah, like, I will also say, I mean, the scenes of people being ripped open, it was, I mean, the thing is, I don't really have much to compare it to, because I've never really seen somebody be ripped open. It looked not entirely convincing compared to, say, another film which might have had extended scenes of people being ripped open, which look considerably more visceral.
Well, interestingly, just on the blood, I'm looking on Wikipedia. Tom Savini was an early opponent of the blood, but George Romero thought it added to the film, claiming it emphasised the comic book feel of the movie. So again, they're not going for realism. Again, this furthers my point, really. They're going for just, let's make it fun, let's make it comic booky, all this violence, which, again, I think it kind of holds up, because if they try to do it seriously with these effects, it won't look as good 40 years later. So I'm fine with that. Like, if we give a zombie a pie in the face, have some guy try to hook his arm up to a blood pressure machine and have his whole body ripped off from that. Let's do it. Let's do all that mad stuff. It makes it fun. So those are my thoughts on that. You got any more to say?
I think I agree, basically. Yeah. So we'll move on to themes. I've got something I wanted to say right away.
Go for it.
It's not really a theme. I just wanted to bring it up. We get a reference to voodoo in this film. I just thought that was a nice homage, because obviously you mentioned when we were doing Night of the Living Dead how Romero said, that in his mind zombies were, because obviously he didn't consider, he said, they're not zombies in Night of the Living Dead, and he said, for me, zombies were, the people in Bela Lugosi's island, and basically referencing voodoo. And obviously in this film, you then get an homage to voodoo with Peter saying, his dad was a priest in Trinidad, something like that. And he basically talks about how, that was obviously a notion they had in their folklore, which of course we covered with White Zombie. And obviously then in this film, we do get the zombies being referred to as zombies. And I guess basically that was his way of saying, kind of, it was a bit of a passing the mantle moment, referencing that ancient idea. And of course, we actually get, as a side note, a reference to, is it in this film? We get a reference to the idea of this being a viral infection, which is, of course, again, a shift towards how zombies would come to be perceived. So there are some passing the mantle moments in this film, which I just wanted to bring up before we get into kind of the rest of it.
Yeah, no, that's
what I interpreted to be passing the mantle moments. So.
Yeah. I guess, I noticed that Haiti line as well. He said actually his granddad was from Trinidad.
Yeah, Trinidad.
So maybe he didn't want to be too specific with it. And
he should have been like, my granddad, Bela Lugosi. Look into the camera. No, wait, what's his name? Murder legend.
Murder legendre. He knew.
Was a voodoo witch doctor.
No. He was. His granddad was the guy on the island who warned a doctor, have you got a match about the zombie, about Bella?
I like to think that his dad was
Dr. Bruno.
Have you got a match?
Have you got a match?
Anyway, but that's not really a theme. So obviously, what are the other themes, Luke? Tell me. I need to know.
Well,
I couldn't tell.
Yeah, again. So here's the thing. This movie, like we said before when talking about the plot, was it George Romero wanted to create a film about consumerism and how it's like zombies, or did he, or how people act like zombies when they are consuming products, or did he want to create a movie that's set in a mall because he thought that was a good place to, have a zombie or stay when there's a zombie apocalypse going on, and then the theme of consumerism came from that. And you said it was the first one, right? Sorry, I'm just trying to remember.
No, I said, wait. Yeah, no, I said the first one.
Yeah, and I agree. Yeah, because it makes sense, because it's so clearly about consumerism. And that's what makes this movie interesting, because if it didn't have this theme, then it would be, okay, this is actually not that good, interesting a movie. It does have its plus points, and it's not the worst thing ever, but this consumerism angle, this theme, obviously makes it interesting. Like we talked about last week with Night of the Living Dead, about how there's social commentary in that, in terms of how the Vietnam
Society's
War,
getting their shit kicked in, their moral sensibilities ruined via zombies.
Yes, all the social norms being broken down, and all of the commentaries associated with Night of the Living Dead. Yeah, so Romero, he's doing it again. This time he's focusing on consumerism. There's a scene where Fran calls the mall a prison. while Flyboy says, "Hey, we got everything we need right here. We should stay."
Yes.
Peter makes a comment saying they're after the place. They don't know why. They talking about the zombies, obviously. They don't know why. They just remember that they want to be in here. Obviously, that's referencing how everyone in a mall, they're walking around like zombies. It's like, where should we go? Well, let's just go to the mall. I don't know. We like being there. Let's just shop for the sake of it, basically. Romero, by the way, this is from an article that I'm going to read you.
Is a communist.
He's not a communist, no. But, well, maybe he is actually. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. I was going to say, unless you've got a quote of him saying, "I support private ownership of the means of production," we can't say categorically that he's not a communist. Unless
he says, "I'm a capitalist to my bones," like Elizabeth Warren. So, he basically, this is the article. Romero notes his first link between consumers and zombies. Humans have a need for material indulgence, approximating the zombies' blind need to eat human flesh. Vices neither particularly necessarily needs, they just want. So that's one comparison. By the way, this article I'm going to read, it's quite long, but I looked it up and I thought, this makes some really good points. And I don't want to... Yeah. I figured I'd just read from it. It's from a guy called Brian Eggert, by the way. So he wrote this in 2007, I think. So anyway, this is the rest of it. So he says, for Stephen and the other men, the mall is a mound of gold, something to defend or even die for. Fran alone realises their potential mistake. "I'm afraid you're hypnotised by this place, all of you. It's so bright and neatly wrapped. You don't see that it's a prison too." That was the line I was referencing before. Yeah. At one point, Roger howls victory for their mall conquest. "We whipped him, and we got it all." Even in impending death, Roger's obsession with what the mall offers preoccupies his mind. It is the one thing he can cling on in an otherwise chaotic world, now void of any semblance of social order. Surely materialism affects modern consumers in the same way, Romero argues. The knickknacks and endless collections held by everyday people can engulf them, become an obsession, and even provide stability when there is none. Later, all zombie threats are expelled from the mall, including Roger, who Peter kills when his reanimation occurs. A subsequent melancholy strikes the group. With nothing to do, boredom and malaise set in. Once an empty space with blank walls and no carpet, they deck their storage room out like a posh apartment, complete with new carpet, furniture, appliances, spices, and every souffle. Yeah.
Every souffle. They went to the souffle store and got every single one.
I'm just going to skip that word. Any possible amenity conceivable. They direct their attention toward the offerings of the mall, going out to collect their clothes, watches, hats, chocolate, guns, makeup, and groceries. The more they move it back to their hideaway like wandering shoppers, one cannot help but see Romero's correlation between the crawl of consumer culture and the lifeless crawl of the living dead. Consumer culture is Romero's true villain in Dolan the Dead, not zombies. Before the onslaught in the last act, the three take one last look at the mall, almost as if saying goodbye to a lover. So yes, I guess that's
who was that by the way? I think we should probably
well, I said it.
Sorry, I couldn't remember though. So, and I assume that no one else would be bothered to go back and check.
Brian Eggert is the name.
I do remember.
It's an essay that I saw. I was like, obviously he expands on it more, but I thought these were the main points that to take away. But the zombies again. They have a fascination with with killing people that they don't really need to kill, obviously, because they're still surviving, just like consumers and shopping. That's a good analogy there, and obviously Romero makes that clear. When the zombies are walking around the mall, that's pretty obvious. The parallel is there, and again, like the characters, the actual characters in the movie as well, they really are committed to saving the mall. Yeah. They really like it here, and then when obviously Roger dies and they're bored, they go and put on clothes to try and fill that hole in their lives, like obviously modern consumers do or did back in the 1970s and still do to this day. So I think again the critique of consumerism, I think it's a good critique. It's quite cleverly done. It's not on the nose. Well, maybe it is kind of on the nose. I don't know. Depends. Because the thing is, I could imagine somebody watching this movie and not getting that angle. I really could.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think it's
not like Land of the Dead,
subtle.
for instance.
Yeah, I was gonna say, have you seen Land of the Dead? Or
I know what it's about.
Yeah. So Land of the Dead is the definition of not subtle. So I don't think it's too on the nose. Yeah, and I think, to be honest, my main issue with this film, I think, is that I actually obviously like that theme, as I think anybody who's kind of, interested in intelligent films would like the theme. And the main issue for me is actually that I think the film is too broad for just that theme alone to carry it, and that's kind of the reason why I think people get bored by this. Because obviously, there's if this film, I think, was a bit tighter with the theme and a bit kind of just bringing everything together and making it a bit more dense with its kind of thematic exploration, I think that would make it much better. I did have a few things to say. Number one, I was about to bring it up, and you said we'll talk about the themes. Obviously, the line that I picked up on was when Stephen says, "This is ours," and or something like that says, "It's belongs to us," and then he starts shooting the raiders, and that kind of, it leads to his demise, and kind of to a lot of things possibly going wrong. And of course you do get Peter, though, who says, hey, they don't care about us, they're just after the place. And obviously, so he's kind of being the voice of reason in that context. So anyway, the obvious thing is the two people who are kind of most critical of where they are the two people who survive. Because obviously Roger, like you kind of brought up, is very obsessed with the fact that, they got the place from the zombies, and then he, dies. And I suppose you could say, for example, that the act during which Roger meets the beginning of his end is the very act of cordoning off something for private use, which is somewhat symbolic, you might say. That they're kind of establishing the boundaries, as Proudhon says, property is theft. To say, hey, this belongs to us and not you.
We've gone in a bit of a different direction here.
Well, I don't know. So I don't think, obviously you can be anti-consumerist and still not a full-on commie.
Yeah, consumerism is different to capitalism.
Yeah. But obviously that there are kind of, what's the word, parallels. The one thing I wanted to say, I was wondering whether or not you could see there's a message here, just because I'm not sure. When one of the kind of only scenes that we see of the newscast before it all goes off air for good is some guy with a eye patch saying that they should consider trying to feed the zombies. I don't know. Do you think there's any kind of thematic interpretation you can get from that? Because obviously it is kind of conspicuous in its presence.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure. I was thinking when that was going on, but I'm like, what is he trying to say here? Or does he mean feed them as in give them something in their lives so they don't need to go back to the mall? If we're just talking about themes, like how you give people, I don't know what. Yeah,
because
go on.
I was going to say, because obviously, the pretense for that is he's basically saying that the zombies need food, kind of, or he's implying that. 'Cause he says, the zombies eat 5% of the people, so that they can still get up and continue to be zombies. So he's talking about how the zombies are kind of meticulous with things, which would kind of seem to contradict the message. And then, so I don't know if what's going on there. Obviously, spoiler alert, because I don't think this is much of a thing in Day of the Dead, but in Day of the Dead you do get the line, hey, it wants me, it can't get any sustenance from me, but it wants me. So that kind of makes more sense with this theme. But in this version, it seems like he's implying the zombies do need things. So I don't know, I don't think necessarily... You could say, obviously you do get the line, basically saying, hey, they won't be satisfied until we're all dead, I think he says, like until we're here. So I guess you could say that bit there speaks to maybe the insatiability of consumer culture. So I don't know. Yeah,
you're right. By the way, I didn't mention it before, but when Flyboy or Stephen dies, the greed basically corrupts him. He cares so much about the material possessions, he's just not willing to let it go, and ultimately he pays for it with his life.
I just wanted to say one more thing on this theme, which the newscaster wants a fake info on the screen. Go on. Go on. And I thought, so basically, I don't think, obviously that's kind of before the zombie stuff happens, so it's like, hey, it doesn't matter if there's fake info on the screen, because if we take that info off, people won't tune into us. And I thought, so you kind of right from the beginning got this criticism of the sort of profit mindset, where it's guys like, hey, we need those ratings. The way we're going to get those ratings is by having all of these safe stations on there. And yet, of course, those stations are not safe, and obviously Fran takes them off the air and makes everyone angry. So that's not really a kind of... There's nothing metaphorical there. It's literally what it is.
Yeah, I know. I agree. So back to the consumerism angle, I guess. I just want to... So that's the theme. We've discussed it. It's pretty clear. And we both said it's cleverly done in a way, well, it's certainly more clever than some other George Romero movies, and the average person might not get it watching it for the first time, and not knowing any of the background, obviously.
For the first time.
So, here's the thing, though. Is it a good critique? Is it something that is interesting as a critique? Because I don't think it's not as interesting as Night of the Living Dead, say, when it's about the all in the house. It's like a microcosm of American social relations. The antagonism between Henry, who's the white guy, and Ben, the black guy. The struggle for leadership throughohout the house. And
the conflict between the younger and the older generation.
Yeah, struggle between African American and white Americans, and just the history and the status of African Americans compared to white Americans, and all of that kind of stuff, and the social trauma. It's very interesting. It is, but this movie is just like, people spend all their time at the mall. It does kind of feel like very we live in a society kind of way. Maybe that's just because it's been 40 years and that consumerism is just normal now. But maybe back in the day in the 70s when consumerism was just starting to get going, this was an actual really good critique. But if somebody came out with a movie like this today, like critiquing consumerism, it would be like, well, yeah, obviously, like, yeah, that's the way it is. So yeah, I didn't find it as interesting as Night of the Living Dead thematically. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, it does feel a bit not the most original idea, or kind of not the most.
Well, it could be original.
I guess I'm saying not the most groundbreaking idea. Oh, sorry, no. Let me think. It's not the most like kind of. So it might be original in terms of.
Is that something about?
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, sorry, that's kind of what I mean. So in other words, it's not necessarily unoriginal in film. Maybe this is kind of the first time that somebody has really said this message, and yet at the same time, I think. Throughout history, I don't think there's any time where people would have gone, oh yes, people mindlessly consuming things they don't really need. I approve of that. It's kind of everyone's sort of clear on the fact that this is wrong. And this film doesn't really say that much other than it's wrong. Whereas I think, for example, like we said, Night of the Living Dead, there is more to it. It's kind of not necessarily that it's wrong, but also about kind of the you can take the aspect of the threat level and the fact that, or the disagreement over what to do about these things, where they're kind of disagreeing over their plans, and also, I mean, the fact that, for example, in Night of the Living Dead, all the characters, as antagonistic as they are towards each other, are ultimately together in the same situation, which is kind of more powerful than this version, where you've got the characters are all. Kind of there are no competing personalities within the character group, and the kind of only instance where you get anything that's radically contrary is when a whole other different tribe moves in, and that's not as interesting as having all of these completely different belligerent forces in the same house kind of fighting together. That's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, no, so we do agree on that then, I guess. Yeah, it's a fine topic, I guess. It's average, but it's just not as interesting thematically as Night of the Living Dead. Shall we conclude now, Michael?
Yeah. We had characters, but I think we can definitely skip them, especially given everything.
Yeah.
So shall I go first?
Yeah, you can go first.
Kind of yeah. So this film is entertaining. I mean, it's a good zombie film. At the end of the day, if you are watching zombie films and you're kind of watching from the best zombie film ever to the worst zombie film ever, you're not going to watch many zombie films until you do reach this film, because for all its flaws, it is still a functional kind of zombie film. Having said that, a lot of zombie films aren't very good. A lot of zombie films, are kind of just as, boring or uninspired, stuff like that. But then they don't have other things to say on top of that. Having said that, like I say, if you're going to say the main thing that, so like I've already said, the zombies are not a threat, just to say we're not in Night of the Living Dead. I don't think you even have the aspect of Night of the Living Dead of it feeling like this new horrifying thing. Like, these zombies have been around, I mean, her baby bump gets pretty big. These zombies seem to have been around for months. So there is not even that threat of these things being completely new. They just become mundane. I don't know, maybe that's a commentary on consumerism itself, but ultimately it just feels like you're watching a bunch of not very threatening zombies, which these people are kind of just used to at this point. It's not that exciting. It's not that interesting. The only thing it really has going for it, apart from the fact the characters feel real and things like that, but apart from that, is the themes. And when it comes to the themes, it's not as good as Night of the Living Dead. So ultimately, I'm thinking I'm going to put it below. So at the very lowest point, pretty much, of my sixes. So a very low 6. I'm not going to give it a 5. I'm being kind, but I'm going to put it between Minority Report and Ocean's 11. I'm putting it above Ocean's 11. So Dawn of the Dead in there. Boom.
So yeah, Dawn of the Dead. again, like you said, the zombies, they're not threatening and they're not scary, and I think that is an issue in a zombie horror movie, undoubtedly. I'm sorry, but that is just the case. The special effects and all, I endorse, even though they aren't particularly good looking back 40 years later. It's fine because in the context they were used, it was just like, hey, let's just have a lot of fun. Let's do some cool things. And obviously, I think that's okay. I do like that. Although, I will say, yeah, it does kind of add to the movie not being that scary. But anyway, I think with the plot, yes, it is quite long, but again, you could argue, what do you argue was maybe a critique on consumerism itself?
Well, I argued that the kind of the mundanity of the zombies being kind of almost so unthreatening and just something that the people sort of get used to was maybe a critique on consumerism. That was my thoughts, but I don't think really. Yeah,
mate. So that could be a defense. Yeah, and here's the thing: although you could call it a bit boring, and certainly some parts are a bit boring, and maybe they could speed it up a bit. I don't know. Maybe that's just because this movie has such universal acclaim. Maybe it's just because I'm used to movies which aren't as slow as this one. But anyway, it's what I will say. It is an incredibly realistic look at how I think people would survive in a zombie apocalypse. The characters feel incredibly real, and their decisions feel real, and that they don't do anything really that stupid. Obviously, they make silly, stupid decisions, but there's no overall strategic errors. They're smart about what they do, and so therefore, I have to say, yeah, I really enjoyed the characters and the acting, and that is a big boost for this movie. In terms of the themes. Yes, obviously the consumerism theme, I think it's well done, but ultimately it's not as interesting as Night of the Living Dead's take on, the 1960s and, society living in a moment and being torn apart by a myriad of moral issues. That isn't the case in this one. That, to me, is much more interesting rather than consumerism, which is, it happens and it's shit and people do consume too much and everything, but there you go. That's the way the world is. Well done on pointing that out. But again, maybe 1970s, maybe it's, when consumerism is really kicking off, so maybe that criticism is a bit too harsh. But anyway, Michael, I'm going to give this movie a 6 out of 10 overall. What did you give it again?
I gave it a 6.
Yeah, all right, good. So,
agreement.
6 out of 10 for Dawn of the Dead. Now let's move on to Day of the Dead. So, Day of the Dead is a 1985 American zombie horror film, written and directed again by George Romero, and again produced by Richard Rubenstein. And this is the third film in Romero's Night of the Living Dead series. Romero described the film as a tragedy about how a lack of human communication causes chaos and collapse, even in this small little pie of society.
Small little?
Yeah.
Talk about redundancy.
He literally said small little, and I was like, wait. That's why I stumbled a bit while I was reading it. Yeah. It's really, like you said, redundant. But anyway, this movie stars Laurie Cordell, Terry Alexander, Joe Pilato, and Richard Liberty. It was released on July the 19th, 1985 in the United States. And Michael, can you guess the budget for Day of the Dead?
3.5 million.
What? 3.5?
3.5 million.
That's exactly right.
I swear to God, I did not know that. I genuinely did not.
Well, my logic was, otherwise this whole thing is a farce.
My logic was, because I was thinking like, okay, Dawn of the Dead was 1.5 million. I could see this being like a tiny bit more expensive, plus inflation. And yeah, I genuinely, 3.5 million, that was my genuine guess.
Fair enough.
Like, not, I 100% didn't know.
Congrats, give yourself a pat on the back.
And we'll see that when I get the box office wrong.
Okay. What's the box office?
It's, I don't know, I think this probably made less. So what was the last one? The last one made like 55 million. I'm going to say this made the same amount, but obviously with inflation that translates to less. So I'm going to say it's also made 55 million.
A bit lower, Michael, than that.
Okay. 50 million.
34.
34, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, still profit, but in fact, it's still 10 times its budget.
Yeah. So yeah, just over, again, another massive success financially.
Sorry, just under.
But yeah, not as much as the first one. Anyway, Michael, so Day of the Dead, did you like this movie?
I love this movie. I've always considered this film to be a real underrated gem. I consider it to possibly be, I definitely consider it to be one of the best horror films ever made. I consider it to be comfortably the best zombie film ever made. And yeah, I really couldn't even pretend to be slightly nuanced in my response there. So I guess the real question is, Luke, did you like this movie?
I can't believe that. Wow. So you really like this one. You think this is the best of the three?
Yeah, I love it.
Wow, so here's the thing. I think it's the worst of the three.
Oh, you agree with all the critics, Luke. How's that make you feel?
It makes me feel like what did Dylan say? What did he call people who agreed with critics? A sheep, that was it.
Yeah, you're a sheep agreeing with the critics. Yeah, bish.
Yeah, so wow, that is crazy. I did not expect you to say that. But I guess before we started recording this, you were quoting it back to me, so maybe it does make a bit of sense.
I've seen this film a lot.
I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this then, and interesting to see what your responses are to my challenges, because I'm definitely going to challenge you on some things.
Well, I suppose the first question is, do you have any nitpicks?
I have one.
I've got two, actually, so...
Oh, wow, this is your favourite movie ever, wow.
Yeah, well, so you go first.
Okay, yeah, I'll go first. So, again, it's people doing stupid things, and normally, I'm like, oh, whatever, I don't care. But, like, in this movie, there were so many instances of people just running and just not looking behind them, like, fucking, I think it's called Steel, the fat guy, runs into a room, and there's, like,
he's
three...
not that fat.
What?
He's not that fat. I mean, he's tactically wide.
He's the fattest one there. So
yeah, he's the fattest one.
He runs into a room and just like there's 3 zombies behind him, and he just doesn't look behind him. He just looks at the door like, surely when you run in, you just look around just naturally at the room, see if there's zombies in there. Apparently he doesn't. Then the zombies come up behind him and kill him.
Yeah.
So yeah, but no.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of zombies behind him, so there's a lot of zombies where he's just ran from, so I can kind of see him being a bit like. So sometimes, like it's when they always get you, because he's like, I mean, we're talking about obviously he's focusing on killing Bub. And he's like, come on, bub. And he's kind of focusing on that. And that's kind of what happens. Whenever you play like a video game, it's always when you focus on one thing. Like when you play chess, and it's always like, you're focusing on your one ththing. That's when they get you. Because you're focusing on the one thing you're trying to do, and therefore you get blindsided.
Okay, well, I still think it's a nitpick. So there you are.
So my two, both actually right at the end, pretty much. They had the guy who can fly the helicopter climb up the ladder last. So obviously it's, I can't remember his name. Obviously Jamaican guy. Do you remember his name?
Yeah, I don't remember his name, but yeah, the Jamaican guy, the black guy.
Yeah, the Jamaican guy. So yeah, he flies up, so they're climbing up a ladder to get to the helicopter. He climbs up last. He almost gets got. You think he's going to get got. And then obviously, drunken Irish guy shoots, and he's like, we need you to fly the whirly bird. And I'm just thinking, yeah, you probably shouldn't have had the only guy who can fly the helicopter, be the last person to climb the ladder, because if he gets got, none of you are getting off there. And finally, this one's a bit of a, not really a nitpick, but Rhodes doesn't have a spine. That's the one. I mean, there's there are plenty of issues you can kind of have with things like that. But the one that does always stand out to me. So Rhodes, when he gets ripped apart.
I thought you meant like literally.
No, yeah, I get what you're saying.
Figuratively.
But obviously, I get what you're saying. But yeah, so he gets ripped apart, and obviously, they're kind of dragging his bottom half away, and there's very noticeably no spine.
Maybe they ripped it out.
Maybe they did.
Somehow.
Although I don't know.
Yeah,
choke on him.
Well,
do you remember when he says that?
What does he say?
I remember that. He says, choke on him.
Okay, you really, damn it, you really like this movie. Wow. Okay.
I remember every single line. You know what I mean? Because the thing is, you think that I was able to quote it just because I've seen it recently. No, I quote it to myself. I'll be doing the dishes. It's kind of like, a lot of people like sing songs in the shower and stuff like that. I quote Day of the Dead in the shower. Like, you made me look like an asshole out there. Why don't you tell us about the plot, Luke?
Sure thing, Michael. So the plot, well, basically it's just a bunch of people, scientists, military men and women, not just men, I guess, on the military side, holed up in a underground bunker, trying to do research on the zombies to see if they can, be turned back into humans, or if they can be trained to, be normal, I guess. And eventually, stuff happens. The communication, that's what Romero says anyway. He says the lack of communication causes chaos and collapse, and nothing really happens in this movie for this whole operation to fall. There's no zombie, inbreak of the facility. It's just eventually humans fucking it up for each other, and that's what ends up happening, and that is why everyone but 3 people die at the end. So yeah, that's basically
it is.
Yeah. So what do you have to say about this movie, Mike? Why do you like it so much?
So okay, I'll start off with literally the first thing I have to say, which is a positive. I think it's what I like about this film, apart from anything else, is that it's it's very believable to me because we it's about what, to me, a zombie film should really be about, which is, you survive. Because obviously I said with Night of the Living Dead, you survive the first night. I mean, these zombies, they're not so scary. Even Day of the Dead zombies, which are more of a threat, they're not so scary that I don't think you'd have a decent chance of surviving the first night. You might even survive, kind of a couple of months as they do in Dolan the Dead. This film, there is an implication if they've been here for months and possibly even years. And I like that because I think it's kind of, to me, that is a much more realistic foundation for conflict in a zombie film, saying, hey, these zombies have been there forever. And these people are kind of accepting the fact that, they might never actually be able to rebuild civilization. They might literally not be able to survive. And I kind of like the idea that this is moving to sort of the long-term reality of a zombie apocalypse, which is what I think the real kind of threat or fear of a zombie apocalypse should be about. So yeah, that's my kind of first point.
So the real threat of a zombie apocalypse should basically be other humans then, because of the breakdown in society. There's no law and order anymore.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it doesn't necessarily have to be, because, for example, you could be completely on your own and the threat would still be, or even with people who you kind of like and trust, and the problem would still be, we need to be able to survive. We, can't farm in a society where, there's zombies everywhere. We can't have, a robust trading network. Best case scenario, we can maybe try and cordon off a piece of land and be sustenance farmers, but ultimately, we're never going to be able to literally rebuild society. So even if, you're with people you trust, even if it's not about society collapsing, you still have that aspect of, people, where do you go? Ultimately when you're completely safe, when you're not worried about zombies breaking in. I mean, there is not really any major fear of zombies breaking in. They're quite comfortable saying, hey, we're safe here, and they're not even concerned about other human beings, but we're completely isolated in this project. And obviously, there's a bit where Irish guy basically says, hey, either nobody can hear us because nobody's in range of this World War II equipment, or we're alone, we're stranded, we're the last ones left. And I thought, to me, that's what, like I say, the fear of a zombie apocalypse should be about. Not the first night, not the first couple of months, not even the moment where you're worried that other people are going to show up and try and take your shit from you. The moment when you realize, hold a minute, maybe nobody's going to show up because everyone's dead and we're the last ones alive, and anybody who could even be close to considered alive is out there getting ready to eat us. That to me is kind of the more, I guess, sort of, that's the real shit of the zombie apocalypse. To me, that's where shit gets real. Okay, so I do like that, and I agree with you, but is it executed well, though? That's the question I'd ask you. See, okay, I guess here's the thing. So I think I understand what your issue is. So your issue, I think, as far as I can tell, is pretty much with at least every single thing that happens in the film up until Miguel brings the zombies down. And you may have problems with after that, but if I think I'm understanding correctly, or kind of not really understanding, because I'm sort of just guessing here, your problem is you find the stuff leading up to the zombies getting in boring?
No, I wouldn't say boring. No. Because, well, what was the point you were making before?
What, literally just for ages to say?
Yeah, just clarify it with one sentence.
All right.
If you can.
The inability to rebuild society after a zombie apocalypse, and knowing that ultimately you're going to run out of stuff, and that basically at this point it's a war of attrition that you can't win because the people you're up against are literally dead already, is the real fear of a zombie apocalypse. Or the real threat of a zombie apocalypse.
But here's the thing, that kind of idea, I know it came after, is explored in The Walking Dead. And it's obviously that has several seasons, and that right there is kind of something that to me isn't that interesting. And I think The Walking Dead, in terms of execution, certainly the first season does it better than this. I mean, I think it's more. They're in a very unique situation there. They've got guns, they've got supplies. Like, it's not, I guess, for the average person, the real fear of a zombie apocalypse would be to be in this situation, experimenting on zombies and, having a war between two factions inside the group. So,
okay, yeah, I get you. So in other words, you're saying it's not like, and actually I think that's probably kind of, so in other words, you're saying, to kind of compare it to the other two films, Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead are about literally what could happen to almost anyone. I mean, lots of us don't know friends with helicopters, but you can kind of imagine, It's basically people up and go.
Yeah. Well, I said that was the main thing I liked about Dawn of the Dead in terms of the plot. It's like this feels extremely realistic as how people would react to a zombie apocalypse, how people would try and survive a zombie apocalypse. So that counts for, something. And in this movie, I get what you're saying. And the real fear is just attrition. But again, I'll just go on to my other point about it. I don't really see that as that interesting, because to me it's like obvious. It's like, obviously that is the issue. Society collapses, and then you're going to have to try and find a way, to try and get things back to normal as soon as possible. That is, quite obvious in the zombie apocalypse. Those are just my thoughts. To me, it's not that interesting to me.
Well, okay, so I'll say this. I suppose, regarding the point of it kind of not being like, it being like a bunch of scientists and military people, I think it's obviously a case of, with the other two films, like you say, it's kind of this could happen. Not this could happen to me, because obviously zombie apocalypse doesn't seem very realistic, but it does feel kind of, the people feel more relatable. But I think like you get, obviously a lot of horror films are about people who we wouldn't necessarily relate to, but we can still kind of understand the situation. That was sort of my attitude. I will say, regarding the question of whether or not they kind of do this well, whether or not they make this scary, I don't know exactly to what extent I could say they make that idea scary. I do think, for example, one kind of moment I really liked in the film, which related to that, and this is also in general kind of a highlight of the film for me, was the interaction between Frankenstein, also called Logan, and Rhodes, where basically, I don't know, I really like the kind of dynamic there anyway, where like, Frankenstein's like, oh, excuse me, is there food? And Rhodes just gets really angry. But the thing is, okay, so basically Rhodes keeps saying, loads of things, like making loads of threats, like, we're gonna march out there and we're gonna shoot them all. And Frankenstein's like, with what? There's no bullets, you don't have enough bullets for all of them. And he's like, yeah, well, we're gonna go and we're gonna take the whirlybird, the helicopter, and we're gonna fly away from this dump. And Frankenstein's like, where would you go? And so I guess what I'm saying there is kind of, I liked that aspect of the exploration, where you got this one guy who's like, basically saying things which kind of seem obvious and intuitive, and the things you might angrily say in that situation, and then contrasted with Frankenstein, who's like very kind of logical about it, and just like, hey, this is, you literally, you might be angry at the situation, but this is all there is, Buster. So I guess,
okay,
what I'm saying there is, I'll let you interrupt it.
Okay, well, here's the thing, like, that dynamic obviously goes into what I was going to say, because I didn't expect you to have so much of an overwhelming admiration for this movie, so I thought we'd start off by saying how different this movie is to Dawn of the Dead. This movie is much more, I guess, pointed in terms of what it wants to do. It's much more like a traditional movie, I guess, is what I'd say.
I think that.
Characters, they're more stereotypical, they're more defined, the narrative is more intentional, of what's happening. But the thing is, I didn't really enjoy like the characters being stereotypes, because it's like, you talk about the dynamic between the doctor and the military guy. I'm just like, well, isn't that just, I just found it boring. It's like, yeah, of course the military guy is going to be very bombastic and, think about, oh, we'll just do this and this and we'll shoot them all, and not really thinking more than one step ahead. And the scientist is going to be the calculating one who, thinks logically. It's like, yeah, that works, because, well, it works, but again, it's not really that interesting to me. So, that's what I think about that.
No, I think probably if there were going to be two criticisms I can imagine somebody making of this film, the first one would be the claim that it's kind of boring, which you didn't make, and that's fine. But the second one, I think, would be the claim that the characters are kind of stereotypical or one-dimensional. Obviously, you've got kind of an example of the stereotype, the Irishman is constantly drunk. Obviously, that's not really a kind of really a narratively relevant stereotype, but it does show that this film does have a degree of stereotyping to it. I think ultimately,
the Jamaican is all relaxed and everything.
I was thinking that, like the Jamaican's like, oh, even if all this wasn't going on, I could still get up in my whirlybird and go to Jamaica. Even though Jamaica would be filled with zombies, you idiot. Well, because Jamaica has a very large population. Well,
isn't that right there just showing how uninteresting this movie actually is in terms of the characters? It's just, I found the characters much better in Dawn of the Dead, because, like I said, they feel very real. In this movie, they don't feel that realistic. They just feel like, like stereotypes. Military guy and all the guy who's head of the military guys, he's, very aggressive, murderous or whatever, and the rest of them are just, morons. The scientists are the smart ones who think logically about stuff. The only real interesting character is probably Miguel, obviously the guy who commits suicide at the end, and that's it. So I don't...
Good old Michael.
I don't really understand how you can be interested in these dynamics when they are very played out and you should be used to them.
So my thoughts are, number one, I mean, first of all, I think there is ultimately a trade-off, and I can see how you might say one is better than the other, but obviously there's a trade-off between having defined, not always, but I think there is an extent to which you can say you have defined characters or you have kind of nuanced characters. And I think that's definitely a true kind of aspect. And ultimately, so I would say I can definitely get what you're saying, that nuanced characters are better, and I'm going to kind of try and respond to that a bit more substantially.
Well,
but
no,
I would also
think
say...
not necessarily. Stereotypes can be better, but in a movie like this, where it's about communication, people discussing with each other, if your characters are just stereotypes, which have, no common ground at all, then obviously it's going to be quite easy to see where this lack of communication is going to come from. But if the characters were more nuanced, less stereotypy, then the overall message of the movie, which, like Romero says, is about human communication, it doesn't happen, and therefore, the things break down, that would surely be better. That the overall message would be better if the characters were more nuanced.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, what I was going to say, so I get what you're saying, but I was just going to say that ultimately, even if characters aren't nuanced, you still do get the kind of benefit of them being well defined. But I would also say, I think in some sense, so obviously if you can almost go through every single character, and I think in a way that's kind of a profitable thing to do, even though it's kind of jumping a bit ahead, but I think there's some logic. So for example, you've got the army guys. But the thing is, okay, so for example, the army guys, I can understand why they would be like they are. That makes complete sense to me because the army is a very macho environment, and I think ultimately I really don't have a problem at all with the army guys being like that. I think you could say, for example, well, Rhodes, he's a bit over the top. I mean, for example, Rickles and Steele, and like, I completely buy that. I completely buy that in a zombie apocalypse, you'd have these two kind of army guys talking about how big their dicks are in the middle of a cave. Rhodes, I think, is kind of crazy, but I think this would kind of be my thoughts on that. You could say, ultimately, a film starts in a place, and the implication is the film starts in a place where the story gets interesting. So in this hypothetical scenario, so imagine, for example, that there is an actual cave somewhere with this zombie stuff going on. Because there was a guy before called Major Cooper, and apparently Major Cooper wasn't actually that bad. And obviously the implication is, well, the camera wasn't running when Major Cooper was there because things simple. But then this guy called Rhodes, who ultimately is an asshole and a complete control freak, but it kind of makes sense that you would have someone like that in the army who would, become powerful. So I can believe that person would exist and that they would come to power. And obviously when they do come to power, that would be when your film starts. So, and the thing is, you look at, I think the woman is, I don't think you can say that she's really very stereotypical. I mean, she's kind of angry. She's not exactly there's no stereotype there. I think especially, it would be kind of my flip side, I suppose. You could say, for example, Barbara and Fran are very kind of weak female characters in a lot of ways. They're very incompetent. Whereas you could say, for example, this character
starts off like that.
Yeah. Fran gets better. Yeah. But obviously in this we do actually have a strong female character. So I think that's kind of a positive. And then obviously you get, the science guy. I mean, I think the first science guy, the guy is like, you better watch yourself. I mean, physically watch yourself. He's pretty normal. So really then you've got three guys.
Well, he's pretty normal for a scientist. I guess, the biggest stereotypes are
is Frankenstein.
Yeah, Frankenstein and the military guys. But they...
Oh, no, I was going to say Frankenstein, maybe Jamaican guy.
Jamaican guy's not that involved in the actual plot there.
I mean, I think the thing is, obviously with the Jamaican guy, I will say this. Stereotypes in some contexts do exist for a reason, and I think it's true. Obviously, here's the thing, okay? So obviously, a Jamaican person is probably going to indulge in a lot of Jamaican culture. And when you think about what's Jamaican culture, it's, reggae music. It's kind of, that chill, funky music, that's often about don't worry about a thing. So you can imagine, a Jamaican person would be pretty chill. So
I just hope this doesn't sound incredibly ignorant, what you're saying right now.
I don't think, so ultimately the thing is, you would say, for example, somebody from the southern US is more likely to act like somebody stereotypically from the southern US because they're exposed to the culture of the southern US. So I imagine similarly, somebody, they match like Southern US stereotype, and likewise, somebody from
okay. Well,
Jamaica
I get
would
your
be
point. Yeah, but let's move on.
But regarding Frankenstein, I think the weird thing about Frankenstein is, to me, he feels very kind of real, but obviously like completely off his rocker. But I think you can imagine, that there is a actual correlation between, because clearly Frankenstein is a high functioning sociopath. I mean, obviously, he's like, this is Major Cooper. He's more useful for us now than he ever was when he was alive. He's very clear. But having said that, high functioning sociopaths are the kind of people who would be very good at like science and stuff. So the main thing I liked about it was that, in a way, everyone's kind of crazy and everybody's sort of flawed. So, for example, just to go through them, army guys, you don't need to go into why they're crazy and why they're flawed. But Frankenstein, like I say, he's a high-functioning, he does seem to be a sociopath. Like, he doesn't seem to understand why what he's doing is wrong and why what he's doing will get people in trouble and bother people. The little weedy scientist guy, no, I'm kidding. He doesn't really have much of a thing going on. But then, obviously, you could say the woman, I think the woman's probably the most kind of basic good guy, or good girl. But she's a bit angry, a bit stubborn. I don't know. Yeah, you're probably better off. Miguel, obviously, he fucking slaps a woman in the face. He's clearly going crazy. And then you got the Jamaican guy and the Irish guy who are kind of just not really. They're not really good guys, and they kind of just ignore the thing going on with Rose. They don't really care. And then eventually they only become good when they're forced into it. But they're mostly just like, hey, we don't really care. So I feel like there is a decent amount of like nuance to the characters, even though they are stereotypes. Obviously, because here's the thing. Frankenstein, he's not a good guy. He's not like some.
It's not like there's nuance with Frankenstein.
I think there's nuance.
He's literally called Frankenstein, which is a fucking stereotype. The fucking military guys coined the stereotype. They're like, come on. There's no nuance about him. There's no nuance about the military guys. I'm sorry, the characters in this movie, apart from Miguel, they're all one-dimensional. Like, the woman you talked about, she's not a stereotype, but she's your standard good guy who's in every movie. The standard protagonist. It's like, oh, I'm really good. I'm morally correct about everything. I'm the reasonable one. It's like there's nothing interesting about her. I'm sorry, there is nothing interesting about any of these characters save for Miguel. That is my opinion, and obviously you have a different one, and that, to me, means the dynamics of the group aren't that interesting, and it also, like I said before, means that the overall message of the movie could have been better if the characters were more nuanced.
So obviously, so in a sense, and the problem is, in some sense, obviously there's a sense in which it's subjective, and I agree that there is a degree of stereotyping to it, a considerable degree of stereotyping to it. However, for me, I think what I would say is my flips, is kind of my thoughts on that, is that I do think there is enough more kind of, I would say, moral nuance. Because obviously, I think you could say the army guys are 100% bad, and the girl is pretty much 100% good. I would say she's kind of a bit, she's kind of angry. So, I don't know. But I would say, obviously, for example, you've got, like I say, the chillaxing guys are more, they don't really care. And ultimately, when push comes to shove, they will be good guys, but they're not really like, actively being good people, all things considered. And then obviously you get the Frankenstein guy, who is, again, not a good guy at all. He's literally chopping up dead soldiers and things like that. And I tell you what, I like, just inside, I like the line where the scientist guy, I'm going to refer to, I really wish I remembered his name, but he doesn't really get much of a mention.
Dr. Logan, by the way.
No, the other guy who's not. Oh. So I know that Frankenstein's actual name is Logan. I did know that, which is useless. I've got two names for one guy, and I can't remember the other guy's name. But
I think it's Dr.
We'll
Fisher.
just call him.
That's what he's called.
Yeah, Fisher, that would be it. So Dr. Fisher's like, we don't have to be subject to your tyranny. And Rhodes is like, hey, who's subject to what? You've lost one guy. We've lost 5. And the point being, he's like, so I can kind of understand why the army people are annoyed at what's happening.
Well, of course you can understand it.
Yeah.
But I'm saying it's just not that interesting. Don't you see? Like, I get it, but it's just not that interesting.
I don't know, yeah. See, for me, and that's the thing. Like, I think, in a way, obviously, we've kind of, there's not too much that can be said in terms of, like, either of us, like, reaching an objective conclusion. But for me, I would say, actually, I find it quite interesting. I find it quite interesting because these characters hate each other, and they're getting ready to, fight each other, and they're getting angry at each other. And I find, like I say, I mean, for me, obviously, if the characters are complete stereotypes 100%, then I can kind of get what you're saying. For me, like I say, it comes down to this sort of nuance with their morality and their nuance with, they have different priorities. And for me, that kind of, I guess, saves it from what would otherwise be kind of them just being stereotypes. I mean, for example, I would say this. If these characters were in Night of the Living Dead, I don't think that would work. If these characters were in Dawn of the Dead, I don't think that would work. I think these characters work because this is so far into the zombie apocalypse that things will be getting crazy, tensions will be going higher, and therefore people are going to become, I guess, more tribalistic.
Okay.
So
again,
the army guys are going to become even crazier with their arminess, even crazier with their macho-ness, even crazier with their, why don't we just shoot them all?
Okay,
kind of
again,
attitude.
I think, yeah, you're right, it works. And maybe that's why you like it, because it makes sense and all that. And that appeals to you. But again, I agree, it makes sense, but I just don't care. Because it's like, I can see it happening. Obviously, the armor guys are macho. They're pissed off that they're losing guys, that, they're constantly dying. Yeah, that makes sense. The scientists, well, they want to continue experimenting because that's what they do. It's just the conflict that right there is, it's very, very easy to see, and I just don't have any interest in that. I think it's quite basic.
I think so. I think probably, with that said, that's kind of, I don't think there's much more that can be said, because but I think, to be honest, we might actually be able to get through the rest of this based on what I've got to say without this coming up again. So hopefully that impasse, which is ultimately going to come down to the difference between our two ratings in this film, is done. But I think everything I've got to say now isn't really affected by that. So, I've only got like 2 more things to say about the plot. What have you got?
You
don't think it's very interesting, so
yeah, I've not really got anything else to say. In the plot.
That's fine.
I just want to talk about the themes. So you go ahead.
Yeah, all right, really, nothing else to say about the. Okay, so I've got like quite a few things, so I'll go through it quite quickly then. So, and stop me if you've got anything else to say. But then once we reach the themes, then boom. So, first of all, really my thing, but I liked how the line about filling up the gas tank right at the beginning, just tied it all together with the end. It was like, don't fill up the gas tank yet because they're too excited. It's like, I hope they remember to fill up the gas tank. I don't know. It's just little things like that. But number 2, okay. And I'm going to have to ask your opinion on this. What do you make of the ending? Because the ending is significant, obviously. And here's the fun fact. The first time I watched this film, it was on terrestrial TV. My dad had recorded it. And we watched it, and the recording stopped as they were running to the gate. So obviously, they kind of climb up the ladder, they're running to the gate to get to the helicopter. The recording stopped, and it was so annoying because we were like, oh man, I can't believe, we didn't get to see how it ends. And then eventually, we had to wait. This was, I think, possibly before the time when the internet was like a huge thing. Like, this might have been, I guess it would have been like 2007. So we probably could have gone on the internet, but I just wasn't that tech savvy back then. Anyway, so we waited for it to be on terrestrial TV again, which fortunately wasn't that long. And we watched we got to that point and watched the rest of it. And obviously what happens after that? They run up to the helicopter. She opens the helicopter door. Zombies run out zombie hands, I think, come out and grab her. And then she wakes up and she's on a beach and she ticks a day in her calendar. And I guess also while I'm at it, at the beginning, you have a similar thing where she goes up, she ticks calendar on a wall, and then zombie hands come out of the wall. Do you have any thoughts on either of those two things, or both of those two things? So obviously the beginning with the zombies' hands coming out of the wall, and also at the end, I think more significantly the end, obviously you'll watch this film, and if you're like me, you are invested in it. I guess for you probably didn't necessarily care as much about the ending.
You are correct.
Yeah, but obviously, I mean, it's still, no matter, even if you don't care too much about it, you must be able to see that there's kind of something a bit strange about the film ends, not with them flying away, not with anything else, but zombie hands coming out of the helicopter, and then she wakes up on a beach. Do you have any thoughts about, like, I don't know, maybe you, I guess, don't have much thoughts apart from, that is strange, but any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I don't know if she dies or not. Well, is that the question, I guess?
No, not really. I don't think. See, I think the implication is that she doesn't die, seeing as she wakes up and she's on a beach.
Okay, so
I guess maybe. Holy shit, Luke. Maybe you're right. Maybe she dies and she's having a dream. I don't know. I guess that's the possible interpretation.
Yeah, my thoughts. That's one of the things that I thought could come of it. I just don't know why they would cut like so quickly. like that.
Yeah, honestly, I kind of maybe it's something that I should actually bother to look up because I find it interesting. Ultimately, I kind of just assume that she, has some kind of like sort of PTSD. I mean, obviously, she has that dream where Miguel rolls over and all his guts come spilling out. So clearly, she's got this mental problem with zombies existing, if you can imagine such a thing.
It says on Wikipedia, by the way, that they fly in the helicopter to a desert island, as John has suggested. Doesn't mention anything about there being anything ambiguous about it. So
okay, that makes sense. Yeah, anyway, but I will say I actually like the fact that the conclusion is that they fly to a desert island because that's exactly. I mean, that's just. I don't know. I like that because it's like that's sort of the thing that you might think about doing in a zombie apocalypse. Just saying, hey, go to an island, just live out the rest of your days. And yeah, I thought that was kind of like quite a satisfying ending. It's just a bit strange that they had that weird lead up into it.
It could be about how when they get on the island, the sequel could be about how vacations are actually bad. To parallel with consumerism of being in the shopping mall.
That's it. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, there is actually a video game where you're on a exotic island vacation and there's zombies. I can't remember what it's called. So I had some things to say about the zombies in general. Number one, I think the effects are a considerable step up. In some cases, in a lot of cases, I think overall the effects don't look as ridiculous. Fun fact, by the way, the bite doesn't actually turn people into zombies; it just kills them. And then I remember reading that. So it's not an infection that turns them to a zombie; it just kills them, and then they come back just to come back alive because they've died. But here's the thing I really want to know, Luke. In this film, we have fucking really intense scenes of people being ripped apart.
We do.
So I guess so you basically got four things. Number one, Torres's death. I think so. Torres is the kind of guy with the long kind of curly hair.
Yes.
I've actually got Miguel's death. So Miguel's death is like obviously it's a case of and actually so I don't know, remember of course my famed Jurassic World review. I think I brought up how in we've spoken about Zara's death in Jurassic World and how it was really tone deaf. And the example I used of a death that wasn't tone deaf was Miguel's death in Day of the Dead. Because I was like, hey, Day of the Dead, it has loads of people being horribly ripped apart. But when Miguel dies, because he's doing it as a heroic sacrifice, it's shown as, being slightly more subtle. And I think that's it's just obviously a bit of filmmaking, as they say. Miguel dies a death that should have, by rights, been just as horrible and gruesome as the other three people's deaths. But because he is a hero doing a heroic thing, he gets to die a nice death, so that's just filmmaking. But then you get number two, Torres. One comment on that. Did you notice how when his head was getting ripped off, he was screaming and it sounded weird? Yeah,
it did, yeah.
Okay. Do you know why that was the case? So basically, I think it was Tom Savini was theorizing, or I guess maybe even this is true, saying, hey, why is our voice high pitched? Because our vocal cords are being stretched. And it was so basically the in-universe explanation, I don't know exactly how scientific this is, but the reason why his screaming is so distorted is because his vocal cords are being stretched as his head's being ripped off, which I just think is pretty metal.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah. And then you get Rickles' death, who is just crazy. And that's pretty gruesome too. And then obviously you get Rhodes' death. And again, pretty much the same thing. And then, of course, you get, at the end, hearkening, I think, back to Day of the Dead, a much more gratuitous, Night of the Living Dead, let's get it right, a much more gratuitous scene of zombies just eating organs. So kind of, it's hearkening back to, of course, that classic scene in Night of the Living Dead, the crazy scene where zombies just start eating people's organs, and we get in this, just a very, quite long scene of zombies just eating people's organs, which is cool. So yeah, any comment, I guess, just on the kind of brutality and viscerality?
I didn't really find it that scary. I guess if you really like gore and stuff like that, you'll love it. But it's not for me personally. But again, I did appreciate, like I mentioned in Dolan the Dead, how in this movie, in Day of the Dead, the zombies do seem more aggressive. They actually seem like a threat. They actually seem like you couldn't just run past them. Like when the fat guy at the end he couldn't open the door, and loads of zombies were. Going at him. I was like, because if that happened in a previous movie, in Dawn of the Dead, I'd be like, oh, you can get out of that fight. You can just run through them or past them, knock them aside. I was like, nah, these zombies, it doesn't seem like you'd be able to do that. They'd kill you quite quickly. So I did like the upgrade in the zombies. I think it is a really good balance. because you want them to be slow, you want them to be, like not all there intelligent wise, but you still want them to be aggressive enough to actually scare you and actually have a threat. So I really did like how the zombies were positioned in this movie. So
because you were kind of talking about how the zombies were pretty good. I will say one thing, okay, so something that you get nowadays, I think it's been common with the zombie renaissance, is fast zombies. So you get it in World War Z, Fast Zombies. You get it in the Dawn of the Dead remake, Fast Zombies. You get it in 28 Days Later, Fast Zombies. And I remember actually when I was reading a review in the TV paper, I think it was the Radio Times, if you can imagine such a thing, for The Walking Dead Season 1. And the only thing I remember that stuck out to me is that the guy basically said, well, this was shit because the zombies are slow and slow zombies are boring. And it got me thinking, I feel like there is a stigma against slow zombies. And I think the reason why there is this stigma against slow zombies is because Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead are the two famous films. And people watch Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead and think, wow, these slow zombies are no threat at all. So when they're making Dawn of the Dead remake or 28 Days Later or World War Z, they think, I'm going to have my zombies be fast because that'll be a threat. And I like this film because this film shows kind of, in my opinion, zombies should be slow. I really believe with all my heart, zombies should be slow. And these slow zombies are like terrifying. I mean, I wasn't scared watching this film, but in essence, they are terrifying. That if you were actually up against them or surrounded by them, if you were in the situation of the Day of the Dead folks in this film, you would be like, I really am not comfortable with these zombies. I do not rate them very highly at all. They're quite scary. So yeah, I mean, it's not scary watching the film. But if you were actually there, you wouldn't be like, hey, let's just run around casually, knocking them over. You'd be like, nope, I'm going to stay up, here.
I agree with you. I think slow zombies are the way to go because it just feels fast zombies. They just don't feel like zombies, So That's my opinion. So yeah, I agree with you.
So I've got one question for you, Luke. On the subject of zombies, Bub. What do you think of Bub?
Bub, I liked it. I thought it was quite neat. The things with him saluting the captain and putting on the Walkman. Yeah, it was nice. It was quite out of place for this movie, considering how much grittier and darker it is. This kind of thing would be more in line with Dawn of the Dead. But no, I think it was good. I think, hey, I like that little scene, even though it doesn't really fit in with the rest of the movie. I think it was good enough that it works.
I like Bub. I think the only thing I'll say, I mean, obviously we're running a bit late, so I'll just say, I think Bub complemented kind of Frankenstein's general craziness. There's other good things I could say about him too, like you say, I mean, the saluting to the captain, the fact he was military, and obviously the soldiers' reaction to him, things like that. I think there's lots of good stuff, but the only thing I would say is that he does complement Frankenstein's character. And finally, I would just say, the soundtrack, to me, one of the things I like about this film is that I do get a real sense of kind of atmosphere.
Oh shit, we didn't talk about music in Dawn of the Dead. I was going to mention that.
Really?
Yeah.
Were you going to mention the fact that the Dawn of the Dead soundtrack was sampled in a Gorillaz song?
It was, and the music is really weird. It's like really out of place, the music.
Oh yeah, they've got a dun 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 dun.
I was thinking,
which has become that standard YouTube stock music. Well, I'm pretty sure Red Letter Media have used it in some of their videos.
I like when this movie started, when I watched it for the first time, Dawn of the Dead I'm talking about, and it started, I was just like, what the fuck is this music? Why are you playing this music over the background? I was just like, this is very unusual, but obviously then it continues and you get used to it. But yeah, go on. What are you going to say?
No, yeah, but I'll just say, I really liked the song about that. It just, I don't know, it works really well, especially compared to, I mean, Dawn of the Dead, the music, I didn't dislike it, but it was just ridiculous. Like, it didn't really work with anything. I think, the soundtrack really complements the feel of the film. And I would say the soundtrack is actually quite high up in one of my kind of reasons why I could kind of get invested in this film, because it just felt very, dense with the theme. Oh, sorry, the theme. Oh, I'm jumping ahead of myself with the atmosphere. Yes. But speaking of themes,
great segue. Yes, so I think obviously there's two themes in this movie. Well, kind of one theme that leads into another. So you've got the fact that Day of the Dead, it kind of in this movie represents a swing for Romero. Instead of viewing humanity as a protagonist, now humanity is kind of seen as the antagonist. The film Zombies are kind of imperfections within us, just as Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead portrayed the zombies as the unmistakable other. Especially with Bub, you could say Day of the Dead kind of
It problematizes that distinction.
Yes, it does. It does problematize it. They seem more like us. And therefore, the tensions, the racial tensions in Night of the Living Dead are just like there's racism in this one. They're just one aspect of that. And here Romero, I guess, tackles like this issue, which is basically humanity is sometimes inhumane. They're sometimes closer to zombies than we would have liked, and that is an issue. And yeah, I think that is a good message. And obviously that leads into the other theme about the Cold War and all that. But we'll get into that in a bit.
No, yeah, I saw. Basically, obviously, Frankenstein has that line where he says, like, they only have. He said, "I've only left the limbic system, which is the kind of desire-based, without any of the kind of frontal cortex." So the frontal cortex is, of course, the reasoning thing, and the basic indication is without our reasoning abilities, zombies are basically what we would become. And obviously, he kind of has that line where, like I said, I've already brought this up, but he removes the stomach and he says, "Look, it still wants to eat me. It can't get any sustenance from me. It doesn't need to eat me, but it wants to." And basically the indication is kind of zombies are unchecked desire, which I think complements the Dawn of the Dead theme. And also, I think it does work in this film where obviously you have a lot of the human characters are bad guys. I mean, even Frankenstein is in some sense a bad guy. And then obviously, of course, you have characters, a significant number of the characters in this film are killed by humans directly. And the kind of the big cheer moment, if you're watching this film and you're invested in it, is when Bub shoots Rhodes, which of course is kind of weird, because it's like you're watching a zombie film, you're like, yes, the zombie just killed a human.
Yes.
And obviously, and then Bubs has a little salute moment, and you're like, yeah, you tell him, Bubs, and it's kind of like, well, Bub. So I thought, that was good.
Yeah, that was nice. The contrast, like you said, obviously it'd be the other way around. One of the main characters shooting the zombie, but the zombie shooting the main character, it's different. And it does, again, go into like Romero's thing about, hey, humans, maybe they're the bad guys in this one. Like the zombies aren't the villains in Dawn of the Dead.
No.
They're not the villains. I mean, you could say they're not really the villains in Night of the Living Dead either, maybe going a bit too far there, but definitely in this movie, they are not the villains. That is humanity. And humanity being the villains, kind of being the villains, I guess, whatever, leads into the next thing, which obviously, why did Romero go down this path? It's in the middle of the 1980s, 1985, the Cold War is raging between the Soviet Union and the United States, and obviously one of the themes in this movie is a lack of communication, and Dr. Logan, who's Frankenstein, says communication, civility allows us not to attack people like beasts in the wild. And I thought, like, clearly this theme of not working together, I think Romero here is clearly trying to, show that human emotions, prejudices...
We can do anything by working with each other.
They can tear us apart. What happened...
Do you know who else can... Yeah.
What?
You were going to...
Yeah, a zombie.
So you're going to make... Yeah, that's a joke.
That's great. Yeah, so just like the Cold War was tearing the world apart at the time, and obviously in the 1980s, that was in the mid-1980s, that was the height of it, with Reagan saying to Gorbachev, tear down this wall and all that. Again, that is some more social commentary, but here's the thing, I think he could have done it better. He could have done it better, because here's the thing which I have an issue with. I think he's making a reference to the Cold War. I'm going to assume that's why he decided to do this movie.
And also, I mean, this film, I think this film carries on the implication from the last couple of films where there's like a radiation aspect to it.
Yeah, so in this movie, here's the thing, like he's saying, Frankenstein says communication is key, and there's a line early by the girl, I forget what she's called, Sarah, I think. She says, we're not communicating with each other enough, that's the issue. But I don't think that's true at all. Like, I think everyone knows everyone's point of view on this. Like, they've had plenty of discussions on what they want to do. They've shared their point of view very many times. And if you want to have this, like, Cold War allegory, what you should have is two bases, and obviously United States and America, and you can have them eventually, you can have them at war with, in real life, the Soviet Union, United States, the existential threat was nuclear war. You could have the existential threat in this movie be the zombies. If they don't work together, they're going to invade these bases because they're not strong enough to hold the bases. They're going to run out of supplies. They need to work together.
Kind of like how the White Walkers in in Game of Thrones are an allegory for climate change.
Yes. Again, climate change and the White Walkers. That is true. I don't know if George R. Martin intended that to be the case. I'm not sure. I haven't read the books or know a lot about Game of Thrones, but it can definitely be.
I think I have heard that is actually what he intended. Yeah.
Oh, right, fair enough. So that can definitely be the case with that, and with this one, again, it's perfect. The zombies, like the White Walkers, they could be advancing on these two bases, which are quite far apart, and they don't have a lot of communication. They're untrustworthy of each other, and therefore, at the end of the day, what happens is they don't communicate. They let their petty differences get in the way, and then what happens is the zombies overrun both of the bases because they're not working together, and they all basically die. So that would be a better allegory, I think, if you're going down the Cold War route. Because the problem with this one is you got two warring factions, but they're in the same building. They're constantly talking to each other. Like everyone, like I said before, knows everyone's points of view. So it doesn't really work while they're together. You know what I mean? If you're going down that path of trying to reference the Cold War. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
No, yeah, I think that's true. I mean, like I said, I don't think I didn't actually even write down themes when I was originally going through this, and that's because I don't really think of this film as being that kind of, I suppose, directly thematic. I feel like this film is almost sort of more broadly thematic in that it's, kind of dealing with, I mean, like you say, I mean, the thing that's very clear in this film, like I said, is the first theme that human beings are the baddies, and I think the thing with the Cold War stuff, it's sort of almost implied as a result of the first theme. And I think, yeah, if you wanted to kind of, let's say, reify the first theme more by picking a real example of the Cold War, then obviously that would have been good. Having said that, I think it's still kind of implied with the fact that obviously you've got the first theme about how human beings or there's no clear division between zombies and human beings, and how human beings are kind of mindlessly violent and tribalistic in their own way, etc., etc. So yeah, I think, you're right. If it was supposed to be and I think it was probably intended to be, but I think you could say it would be more interesting thematically if they kind of made it more Cold War-y. But yeah, having said that, I think you could say that about almost every single one of these films, that there's an extent to which there are things which could have been made more explicit or done kind of more directly to make it more interesting thematically. Yeah,
I mean, I'm not sure directly or interested. It's just that I don't see the point he's trying to make. It doesn't really work because they are constantly talking to each other. The guy calls a meeting, everybody turns up. The doctor is constantly arguing with the military guys. Like, it is a case of, hey, these people really disagree on what they should do. There is no, let's all get in a room and talk it out and everything will be fine, because that's what literally they did, and it didn't.
We can talk it out.
It didn't solve the problems. So I think, if you want to go down that path, maybe just pick a better situation that allows your themes to really make sense.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I can. I basically agree. Yes, that they could have. Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
So, anything else to say?
No. Shall we conclude?
Yeah. So shall I conclude first?
You go first. Yeah.
Okay. So, we obviously disagree on this film. Mostly, I think, to do with, I mean, at least on your end, it comes down a lot to the characters. For me, I mean, if someone asked me, why do I like this film? I would say, because in my mind, this is I'm probably speaking too loud, I just cursed me, there's probably people trying to sleep. This is a perfect zombie film in terms of what a zombie film should be. Like, it's, and we've already kind of discussed, like, slow zombies, but it's slow zombies, and they're genuinely threatening, which is something which, maybe you see that in The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead is obviously not a film. In terms of, like, films where you've got these genuinely scary zombies that swarm, and they're, they're kind of slow moving, but the threat is there's so many of them. I think this film kind of perfects that formula in terms of using that for horror. So in my mind, it's kind of a great zombie film in that sense. And you asked me, I mean, I think obviously the elephant in the room throughout this whole Spooktober thus far is that I was the one who said, hey, let's do zombie films. Like, I picked all these zombie films. Of course, I think I'm quite a fan of zombie films. I'm quite a fan of horror films in general. And I picked these films, and I kind of, White Zombie, I was like, Night of the Living Dead, I was like, 6. Day of the Dead, I was like, Dawn of the Dead, I was like, 6. And then we get to Day of the Dead, and Day of the Dead is actually the film where I'm my enthusiasm for zombies and horror films kind of is going to shine through. And for me, I think that might be what it kind of comes down to. I mean, obviously, you don't like necessarily horror films as much as me. You probably don't like zombie films as much as me. So maybe for me, part of it is also that I think this is a very good zombie film. And I give this film a lot of kudos for being good at what it is. With that said, So the main difference, I think, so on your end, it's going to come down to kind of not being that interested in the characters. And for me, like I say, I mean, we've already covered this so much. For me, I don't think the characters are a strong suit, although I do think a lot of the dialogue is quite good. I do like the way a lot of the characters play off each other. And the only thing that I would say in response to your kind of claim that they are sort of stereotypical is, like I already said, I think there is a degree of moral ambiguity which makes them interesting with, like I already said, Frankenstein's kind of morally ambiguous. The two guys who just want to relax and not really worry about anything are kind of morally ambiguous. And in general, I think this film does have a fair bit to offer in terms of like the conflict between the two people. And it is kind of believable, and especially, again, sorry, I have so many different things to say, but I think the other thing which brings this film together is the fact that it is much later into a zombie apocalypse, which allows it to be more different, and also I think to take advantage much more of the concept of a zombie apocalypse. And yeah, I really do like it, and it is actually a film which I will watch anytime I'm given the opportunity, which it puts in a somewhat we'll say like comfortable bracket, and I'm going to place it above Blade Runner 2049, and appropriately actually below a film which we also disagreed on quite significantly, but The Disaster Artist. And yeah, I genuinely think it's definitely one of my favorite horror films. I think the only other ones kind of like are The Thing, things like that, but it's definitely my favorite zombie film. It's my favorite zombie film, like I say, because I think it's so good at doing what a zombie film should be. And I would actually say, if you like zombie films, you're like, if you walk around, you're like, oh, I love zombies. I love how, they tear people apart, they swarm, how they kind of, blah, blah, blah. I like the idea of zombie survival guides. Like, what would you do in a zombie apocalypse? I would kind of say, hey, watch Day of the Dead. But yeah, so okay. Now tear everything I said to shreds, Luke.
Sure
I defy you.
Okay, so the good things about this movie, I'll go first. I like the theme about the humans being the bad guys. They're too tribalistic, and the humans are closer to zombies than we'd like. I do like that theme, and I do like how the zombies are scarier than before. So those are the good points. You could argue the zombies, hey, they're just acting on instinct. They're not actually the bad guys. The humans who have much more intelligence, making murderous decisions, really. They're the real bad
maybe
guys.
People are the real monsters.
Yes. It's a good theme for a zombie movie. I do like it. But the bad points now. So the characters, as I mentioned before, the stereotypes. You said a zombie film should be like this, but I think this kind of movie is expected. Like, of course, the major issue is going to be surviving long term in a zombie apocalypse. That's going to be a real challenge. And the dynamic between different factions isn't that interesting either. The scientists want to run tests on the zombies, the army guys want to kill everything. Like, wow, who saw that coming? The way the characters play off each other is also predictable. I just don't find it engaging at all. The Cold War thing could have been executed better. Is the theme of Cold War, interesting? Not really, but it is the 1980s, and this was on everyone's mind, so I'll give it a pass for that. So yeah, overall, I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10, Michael. So yeah, quite a big difference.
Yeah. So. That's that.
Yeah. What are we doing next week?
Do you want to? So next week we're actually doing our first on its own film, mostly because I couldn't think of anything that would possibly be appropriate to pair it up with. We're looking at. I mean, like I said, we could have done it with Zombie 2, but I think this film, it's a very unique film. Luke, have you seen it before?
No.
Okay.
Well, I haven't seen it before. We decided to look at it.
Yeah. So yeah. Sorry. Yeah. It's a very quaint little film, Return of the Living Dead, and I'm kind of looking forward to talking about that. So. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. See you then.
Okay.
And or I should say, obviously, Return of the Living Dead is a, like I say, spiritual sequel to Night of the Living Dead. I think it's made by maybe the producer, screenwriter, something. The person who made it has something to do with Night of the Living Dead. So he kind of knew Romero. I was like, I know, I'll take this and make a film that's very similar.
Okay. Yeah. So we have been selecting and reflecting on Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead because of Spooktober. Join us next week for Return of the Living Dead. Who have you been, Michael?
I've been Michael.
I've been Luke. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.